Okay. So welcome everybody, press, visitors, general public. I don't know if ones outside are ready to come in or not because they knew there was going to be a bit of a delay. So also, could you please make sure all mobile phones are switched off? I shall have to announce it again if some more people come in. There's some outside waiting, I think, on the landing.
Are we going to boldly go then today? You will going to be our Jean-Luc Picard.
And you? Yeah, sorry.
Right, good afternoon everybody and welcome. If you could kindly take your seats quickly at the back, and to remind you now again that we are live streaming this afternoon, so will all members please use their microphones, and you know how to operate them, and turn them off once you finish speaking, please. For those who have just entered, please make sure your mobile phones are switched off. Thank you. I'll welcome you all now to the Planning Committee meeting of the 7th of October. Any apologies for absence, please?
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Councillor Blaybrook, Chair.
Councillor Harris and Councillor Mrs. Borden once.
Thank you. All noted, Richard? Right, thank you. Declarations of interest? Right, thank you all, councillors. Before I take the minutes, instead of Martin having to take, he's been here for over an hour, sat patiently doing an hour presentation for us. If he likes to do his recommendations to committee first, please, Martin. Is that okay with you?
Yes, Chair. Shall we take each report separately? There are 3 reports. Yeah. Yes, the first report relates to a supplementary programme for preparation of supplementary planning guidance. As members will be aware, the Monmouthshire LDP was adopted on the 27th of February 2014, and the Development Plans team are and will be preparing supplementary planning guidance, SPG, in a number of topic areas to support and explain policies in the LDP. So this report sets out a programme for SPG preparation. It covers SPG that was adopted under the UDP, and that requires updating and further consultation, and 3 of these are subject to another report that's been made to this meeting. It also refers to current informal guidance that's continued to be used until it's replaced by formal SPG. These relate mainly to planning obligations and landscape. And there's also new SPG, which we prioritised according to urgency and available resources. First priority has been given to significant policy areas, and we hope to make significant progress on these in the next couple of months. In particular, work on the community infrastructure levy, affordable housing SPG, and a project to provide landscape SPG is also underway, although that is quite a large job that is going to take a bit longer to finalise. Green infrastructure SPG, which is again subject to a report of this meeting, has already been prepared, and that was a subject to the presentation that was made before this meeting. Second priority is given to such topic areas: renewable energy, retail frontages, conservation area appraisals, conversion policy and biodiversity. The first few of these we're hoping to make progress before the end of the year. Biodiversity itself is a larger project, but there are already rigorous development control procedures in place to deal with those topics. A third priority then are those that are mentioned as potential SPG in the LDP, but no preparatory work has been done on them to date, and they don't seem so critical at the present time. The programme has been discussed with development control officers to try and make sure their concerns are met, and it's intended that it would be reviewed annually. And we are presenting it to this meeting to make sure that it also try and ensure it also meets members' concerns. And the recommendation of the report is to endorse the draft programme of SPG and then to recommend to the Cabinet member who will be looking at it at the next Cabinet member meeting.
Right, thank you, Martin. Anything else you wish to say?
Not on that, that's the first report.
Right, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, we had quite a session on it, and everything was explained exceptionally well, I thought. I just prepared to move the recommendations, Madam Chair, bearing in mind they are draft, it's a draft programme anyway, and it is subject to annual review, so it's an ongoing exercise. Thank you, Madam.
Have you got a seconder to endorse it? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
The second report refers to the aforementioned Green Infrastructure SPG. As Councillor Higginson said, there was a detailed presentation given before this meeting. We've given this a priority because it's there, it's completed, the work has been done, and it is an important document for use in negotiating on planning applications. It's already been used on an informal basis, but obviously it will carry the greater weight of a formal adoption by Council. So the recommendation is to endorse the draft Green Infrastructure SPG with a view to its in for consultation, and again to recommend to the Cabinet member. And after it's been out on consultation, it will be brought back to members, and we'll be seeking a formal decision to adopt the SPG.
Okay,
Prepared to move, Madam Chairman.
right, all in agreement with that?
Yes, yes. Yeah, this report relates to 3 previously adopted SPGs that have been updated to conform to LDP policies. One is quite a short one. It's assessment for business purposes required under criterion G of LDP policy H4, which relates to conversion of buildings in the countryside. The second one is one that's been in use for some time. It was actually adopted in September 2007. Policies H4 and H6 of the LDP, which relate to replacement dwellings and extensions to dwellings in the countryside. Again, there's some sort of slight updating, and we have introduced an extra section on to try and give some advice on annexes, which is something that development control officers felt was an important concern. And then the third one is design guidance on conversion of buildings in the countryside, which was adopted in April 2012, and again provides advice on conversion policies, H4, which is conversion to residential, RE2, which is conversion to employment uses, and T2, which is tourism uses, where now such proposals have to comply with the detailed criteria of the general conversion policy. So again, the recommendation is to endorse these SPGs listed below, to recommend a Cabinet member accordingly, and then they will be issued for consultation and brought back to members depending on what comments are received.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin.
Prepared to move again, Madam
Right,
Chairman.
thank everybody in agreement with that? Right, good show of hands. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. Okay, thanks, Martin. Right, we'll now continue with what's on the agenda and to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the 2nd of September. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, and page 16. As you can tell, it was a very long meeting, which concluded at 5:20. Councillor Webb?
Moved, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you. A show of hands for approval, please. Thank you very much indeed. We now go on to the applications for today. But before I do that, I think there are some members who maybe, of the public especially, that haven't been in the chamber before. So I should, by all courtesy, introduce the members that are up here, not members, but the officers that are here today. If you would please state your name and your responsibilities, please.
I'm Richard Williams, Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Paula Clark, Planning Control Manager.
Philip Thomas, Development Control Manager.
And Robert Tranter, the Legal Officer.
Peter Clark, the Vice Chair.
And I'm Ruth Edwards, the Chair. Right, we will now continue with the agenda, with the applications. Thank you. Page 3. This is the piggery at Llanbaddock.
Thank you, Chair. The application site was one that members visited yesterday. It's off the A472 at Prioress Mill, and it's about 1 hectare in the size, and it's a former piggery used for educational purposes by the Agricultural College with a D1 use class. And the site consists of various portal frame buildings now in disuse. And planning consent for the residential conversion of an existing brick-built, rendered building in the northeast of the site has recently been granted on appeal. And permission has also recently been granted for the temporary parking of lorries on the site and extended for a further year till the 31st of July next year. So we just run through some photographs so we see where we are. That's the entrance of the site on the left, and the mill, the Prioress Mill Lane that runs into the site off the A472. That's looking into the site from the access. You can see the sort of utilitarian type buildings on the site. That's looking back at the site access with this sort of like silo type building on the left, and the building on the right is the one that was granted planning consent for residential conversion on appeal. And then it's looking further into the site towards the back end of the site. You can see one of the lorries or trailers parked up there with planning consent. There's peripheral growth there on the edge which will be retained. And then that's just another general shot back looking towards the frontage of the site in the lane, but buildings on left and right hand side. That's the site in context. So there's the, excuse me, let's see where I am. That's the A472, that's the access into the site here, the various buildings, the silos here, and as you carry on there's an electricity substation, a group of, if you like, former local authority housing at Prioress Mill, and there's a large Welsh water plant down there near the weir on the River Usk there. And that's a layout, the illustrative layout on the site showing the indicative access and the scale parameters for the 8 houses proposed there, all detached. So it's an outline proposal for 8 self-build residential plots, single access off Prioress Mill Lane. And the indicative layout shows that houses would be broadly in a crescent arrangement with a large front and back gardens to allow indigenous plant growth. Plot sizes vary between 25 metres to 55 metres in width, and outline scale parameters of the dwellings vary between 20 metres maximum width by 15 metres maximum depth. And the height of the dwellings has been set at a maximum of 9.5 metres high and a minimum height of 7.5 metres. It's envisaged by the applicant that the properties would have a series of pitched roofs and be constructed from natural locally sourced materials such as having slate roofs, rendered walls and timber joinery. The proposed buildings would be designed to be energy efficient with a variety of energy conserving features. The application was submitted when the unitary development plan was in force, and during the course of the application consultation period, the LDP was adopted on the 27th of February 2014, which now supersedes the UDP. It's also important to note that the application site was put forward by the landowner as a site for housing during the LDP process. It was a candidate site. This site was rejected by the council as the proposed development would be contrary to the LDP spatial strategy, the site not being part of and or adjoining a settlement that has been identified for potential for development. And this recommendation was upheld by the inspector, and this position has been reflected in the adopted plan. The principle of the proposed housing site is not considered acceptable as it is not an identified site allocated for new housing in the LDP and would be contrary to Policy S1 of that plan. Policy S1 states that the main focus for new housing development is within or adjoining the main towns of Abergavenny, Chepstow and Monmouth. The Seven-Side sub-region consists of the settlements of Caerwent, Caldicot, Magor, Portskewett, Roggett, Sudbrook and Undy, and a small amount of new housing development is provided in the Seven-Side sub-region, particularly Magor with Undy, Caldicot and Portskewett and Sudbrook. The rural secondary settlements are Usk, Raglan, Penpethlenny and Llanfoist. A small amount of new housing development is directed to the rural secondary settlements in Usk, Raglan and Penpethlenny, unquote. There is therefore no policy justification for new housing within the open countryside which this site is within. The proposed development would result in development being located in an unsustainable location remote from services which would lead to an overdependence on car-borne journeys. Subsequently, as the site is not within an identified site under the LTP, open countryside policies would apply. And policy LC1 relates specifically to new built development in the open countryside. And that policy contains a presumption against new built development, although it does identify a number of exceptional circumstances involving new built development that might be permitted, but actually none of these exceptions apply in this instance. And as a consequence, the proposed development would also be contrary to Strategic Policy S13 and Policy LC1 of the Local Development Plan. Although Planning Policy Wales, our national planning guidance that we refer to, supports the principle of new development on brownfield sites, Planning Policy Wales, paragraph 491, also makes clear that this preference for brownfield sites does not override other important planning considerations. And in this case, Monmouthshire's overall housing development strategy comes to the fore. It is considered that using the redevelopment of a brownfield site as a justification for a non-sustainable housing development is not an adequate reason for disregarding the housing strategy of the LDP. It is considered that the site could be developed in other ways in accordance with Policy LC1, such as for agricultural use, and potentially other employment use, which would be more sustainable in planning terms. The Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment submitted in support of the proposal has put forward a mitigation strategy, and in this respect, there is no objection from the Council's Landscape Officer. Despite the mitigation put forward, however, it's not anticipated to completely screen the development from various viewpoints. And there are views, for instance, of the site from elevated land from the north and east of the site. And it is anticipated that despite screening from surrounding woodland, the roofscapes of the buildings and their suburban visual appearance will be visible. Moreover, it's considered that the proposal would introduce a suburban housing development within a rural setting, resulting in a housing development that does not respect the character of its surroundings. The proposed development of suburban housing is considered to change the character of this rural landscape, and its design and layout, set out in the indicative layout and outline scale parameters, fails to harmonise with the existing landscape. So in that respect, the proposal would be contrary to policies LC1 and LC5 of the LDP. So accordingly, we would recommend it, for refusal.
Thank you very much, Phil. I believe the local member wishes to speak. You have 6 minutes, Councillor Smith, and if so, later on, you can have 2 minutes for summing up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, members. I requested that this application be presented to the Planning Committee, if it is recommended for refusal, in order to have a full discussion on the principle of the development and the use of brownfield sites. I hope that members are aware that this is an outline application. It's looking at the principle, the use for residential purposes of this ground. I thank members for coming on the visit yesterday morning rather, it was rather damp. I consider that the piggery is a brownfield site. One of the buildings, as has been said by the officer, has consent, which was one appeal for conversion to residential development. If you look at your report, which I'm sure you have, Natural Resources Wales consider that the planning permission could be granted to the proposed development as submitted if planning commission conditions are included to ensure an adequate flood risk assessment and contamination. The highway officers have concluded that the addition of 8 dwellings using this private highway and the junction onto the A472 would be unlikely to have a significant detrimental effect when compared to the site's previous use and the type of vehicular use that would be encountered should the original use be reinstated. The present use is as storage for a trailer park, and it's quite interesting to watch those trailers being hauled out onto the A472. It's not a traffic manoeuvre that's to be advocated, I don't think, but it's a use for those premises, for this derelict site. The landscape officer, as our officer has said, acknowledges the existing development in landscape and visual terms does not offer an attractive development that contributes positively to the wider countryside. There's considerable room for improvement in the design and layout of the scheme proposed. I agree wholeheartedly. Totally inappropriate scheme. But it is the principle we are looking at. Whilst he does not offer a landscape objection to the scheme, he just says the following issues need to be addressed. The design and layout should reflect a more rural grouping, not a suburban cul-de-sac, and a detailed landscape plan should be provided. I consider this derelict site, a brown field, an opportunity for innovative scheme, enhancement, good environmental design and initiative. I went recently back to Ebervale to view again the eco-houses that were constructed for the National Ice Stedford. They're good. The design's good. They're wearing well. The materials are interesting. The scope that is there now for the design of new housing, look to the future. We should perhaps not be thinking always in Georgian and quaint cottage style. Look at the innovative designs that are there that could be incorporated into this site. So I think there's great potential there. What we have at the moment is a bit of a mess, to put it mildly. There are repeated references in the report to the open countryside. I contacted as well all 23 residences in the locality. There are 23 houses actually, including the Prioress Mill ones in that locality, seeking their views on proposals for the old piggery site. And I received one written response and some comments from other folks not unduly perturbed. I regularly see individuals walking from Prioress Mill and the main roadhouses to Usk, as do the students who attend this college. It's quite interesting, really. We promote exercise as being good for us, it is. The distance from Prioress Mill to Usk is less than that which we require of pupils seeking free school transport. So it can't be all that isolated at Prioress Mill. I don't think so. Also, there is a cycle route between Usk and Pontypool being actively promoted, and this would be accessible to Prioress Mill. Good green transport initiative there. I do understand the concerns of members of the public who perceive an approval of development for residential on this site as the thin end of the wedge, opening the door to further development. If consent were deemed appropriate, I would wish to see an exemplar site development, good design, ticking all the environmental boxes. This could be achieved, and it should be achieved. What we have is a mess at the moment. We could derive benefit from an enhanced environment. And I know I've quoted before, and I will again. Some years ago, I opposed the development of approximately 250 plus dwellings at Woodside. It was a site that was included in the then UDP, and it was against officers' recommendation. Members kindly listened to my views. The applicants went to appeal. Their appeal was dismissed. And in view of the weather and the climate, how right. My stance on any further proposals for development at Prioress Mill would be the same. What is being proposed, in my estimation as a local member, would be enhancement of the area and also the provision of 8 additional dwellings by whomever had the opportunity to construct. It is an outline application, not what you're seeing on, well, you are seeing on the board, but it is outline, it is the principle that is being considered. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We now have another speaker in the locality that wishes to speak, please. Could you state your name, please, and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Community Councillor Mark Reardon, and I will be simply reading a prepared statement on behalf of Llanbadog Community Council. The condensed and specific points of objection from Llanbadog Community Council comprise of what I'm about to say. Above and beyond the copious and vehement formal objections, and the vast majority of residents are opposed to this, despite suggestions otherwise, and the formal objections are a matter for the record. It's basically the core and crucially pertinent point to draw out is that the application brushes over the paradigmatic relevance of Policy S1 spatial distribution of new housing. I disagree that this is an in-principle application and is very much in practice, as you can see. Previous application for residential development on this very site formed part of the LDP process under ASN 097 Alternative Sites Local Development. Residential development at the site was unambiguously rejected. Furthermore, the adoption of the LDP has now taken place, of course. Policy S1 is in fact crystal clear in this particular regard in its remit to only allow, I quote, an appropriate amount of development in rural areas with a focus on those settlements that have the best access to services and public transport. The proposed application does not fall under this high-level focus, being an identified, isolated site with very poor infrastructure and services. Furthermore, it states, too, some sites are allocated for small-scale residential development up to a maximum of 15 dwellings in identified main villages with the primary aim of providing affordable housing to meet local needs. However, crucially, the identified main villages do not include Llanbadog Rada, and luxury self-builds do not constitute so-called affordable housing in current policy terms. Likewise, the development management policy itself is very clear that this type of development cannot form windfall. In this regard, it is outside of any identified main village. And calling it brownfield does not override this policy in any sense. Likewise, the policy states that 3. Development boundaries are drawn around main towns, 7-site settlements, rural secondary settlements and main villages. Outside these development boundaries, planning permission for new residential development will not be allowed in any of the settlements except or adjoining identified minor villages, where small-scale residential development will be allowed in circumstances set out in Policy H3. Again, pointedly, the LDP identified minor villages do not include Llanbadog and Rada. Again, the policy states, outside the settlements listed above, open countryside policies will apply where planning permission will only be allowed for the following types of new residential development. 1. Acceptable conversions of rural buildings in circumstances set out in Policy H4. This application does not fall under this type of development. Subdivisions of existing dwellings subject to detailed planning criteria. Again, this application does not fall under this detailed development. Dwellings necessary for agricultural, forestry, or other appropriate rural enterprises in accordance with TAN 6. Again, this application does not fall under this type of development. In short, the proposed new residential development does not fall under any of these headings. The body of the application seems to redirect from this central policy and base argument around speculative interpretations of Policy S2 and other secondary policies in order to build some sort of case. In summary, being in isolated, non-identified sites requiring extensive travel by private vehicles is not in any way offset by arguably lower impact new constructions than simply add to the housing stock in LDP identified non-applicable sites outside of LDP designation, the Rada site being identified as such. Building more houses in the wrong place, of the wrong type and for the wrong reasons is again logically flawed at its root. More pragmatically, as outlined, it simply directly contravenes the current LDP position, both in spirit and policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Reardon. I believe we have now a speaker in support. Could you please state your name, and you also have 4 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Chris Waterworth, and I'm speaking in support of the application on behalf of the applicant. You find in front of you quite a long complex officer's report regarding this application. However, ultimately, there are two real reasons at the end which are cited for refusal. There's three actual reasons, but two of them are very closely linked together, so I see it as actually two reasons. In respect of the length of the report, the applicant and the applicant's agent have gone through a long process with officers regarding ecology, flooding, highways, accessibility, landscape, arboriculture and trees, visual impact and contamination. And officers have found in every respect that the site is okay in these respects. Turning to the reasons for refusal which we have, as previous speakers have stated, this site is contrary to Policy S1, the spatial allocation of housing, and it's not an allocated site. However, the reason that it was dismissed at candidate sites representation stage prior to the adoption of the LDP were basically lack of sustainability of location. However, we contest that and would postulate that the geographical positioning of the site regarding Usk is no further than the outer reaches of the recently developed Burying Gate to the other end of the town. Additionally, it's a safer route to walk than from the end of Burying Gate. It's less steep, it involves less road crossings and is eminently flat and an enjoyable walk. The second reason given for refusal is contrary to Policy S13, which is development in the open countryside. However, I would argue that this isn't pure open countryside, and I think that in this case, policies LC1 and LC5 should come into play. It's adjacent to a group of established houses, an electrical substation and a pumping station, and also we mustn't forget that there is a substantial amount of development on the site at present, essentially making it a brownfield site. Policies LC1 and LC5 illustrate circumstances for development in semi-rural areas. They quote things such as closeness to other building groups, no significant adverse effect on visual impact, biodiversity or character, and these policies are actually satisfied by the development. The third reason for the refusal, which is written into the officer's report, is that they are unhappy with the architectural arrangement of the site. However, this objection came on the last week of a 12-month application process. So we had no time to react to that particular criticism of the application, having asked officers to engage on the design front for over 12 months during the application period. So in that respect, we would be perfectly willing to re-examine the finalities of the design if it was to be thought to be acceptable in principle. In conclusion, the applicant wishes this to be considered as a brownfield site and a windfall site under Policy S2. We feel that the position is sustainable, a short walk out of Usk, which is flat, well lit, on a pavement, with very few road crossings and alternative green infrastructure methods of reaching Usk via public footpaths. We have offered officers a design handbook at a further stage if this application should produce any further dialogue, which will be tightly control the visual impact and the design of the dwellings within the setting that it's in. We've also committed to low carbon technologies in some way offsetting the perceived reliance on carbon journeys, which I think is actually false. As Councillor Smith said, there are a lot of people who walk.
Could you please wind up? We are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. A good many of the Planning Committee were there at the site visit yesterday. So could I have your contribution, please? Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sites like this worry me. It is clearly out of policy, yet common sense says that we should approve the application. It has existing housing around it. There's planning permission given on appeal for a dwelling or conversion to a dwelling on the site. Although who on earth would buy it given where it was, I really don't know. And under the present policy, it is possibly more beneficial to be marketed as an employment site than housing. Although I do accept a lot of the arguments put forward regarding access to the town, and particularly in view of the fact that there is housing down that lane. There's also the emerging policy that the authority is developing with regarding splitting sites, development sites, to allow local builders the opportunity of coming in and creating employment in the area, and this strikes me as being an ideal site for that. However, as I do accept that it is so far out of policy, it would be very difficult to give it permission. I would strongly recommend that when any supplementary planning guidance and a review of the LDP takes place, we should look at the prospects of having a different policy towards this type of site, because it seems crazy to me that a site should be left pretty well derelict in the area when so much more could be done with it.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I couldn't agree more.
Can I just make a point there? What we've got to be very careful about on these brownfield sites is that we're not rewarding landowners for running down sites, because that can happen so easily. As we know, there are lots and lots of farms close or not so close to urban areas which are more sustainable locations for housing. And we have got a housing strategy which has only recently been endorsed after the adoption of the plan. So what we've got to be careful of is we're not allowing landowners to run down sites in order to actually then develop them for housing, which after all is a high economic land use and an increase in the value of the land. In this sort of situation, the site was historically an agricultural part of the agricultural college, and it could be used for agricultural purposes again, or possibly we can look at and the reason the building was allowed was because it was a conversion. I don't think it was a particularly good decision. We resisted it at the time and felt that the building was too utilitarian really to actually provide a convincing conversion. But anyway, in that inspector's wisdom, they allowed it, notwithstanding the environment around it. But you could convert some of the buildings to employment use, for instance, which would provide a reasonably sustainable employment site. But it isn't particularly close to us. It is what we were estimating about 30-minute walk, really, into the town from there. I mean, most people, if they're going to go and get to services, they're going to drive from that sort of locations. You are really not encouraging, shouldn't be really encouraging housing development on a site as in this sort of location. The housing that's there is an historic thing that was built many, many years ago, and it's not somewhere we'd be looking to really build new housing under the present sustainability criteria we use.
Yes, I think actually the housing that's already there were almost like tied cottages to the agricultural college, and the workers live there. And also there is a farm not that too distant away that went in for housing very similar to this, and they'd got a church, a school that was closed, and a shop, and that was not refused, and it was refused because it is not within our policy. So we do have to be very careful. We do have policies to guide us in a lot of our decision making. Right, anybody else from yesterday? Councillor Powell.
Yes, just quickly following on from what the officer said about the distance and walking. It mightn't be too much of a distance if you're just going to walk it, but if you're going into town to do shopping, I wouldn't be able to carry it, but a lot of people wouldn't want to carry shopping that distance. So then they're going to have to use their vehicles if they drove from there. And I feel the same, that when you look at it, you think, well, it might be a good idea, but once we start that, we're going to have a lot of these little patches where people have just let the buildings go and houses dotted all over the place, which doesn't really bear well.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Jim Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I totally accept the recommendations, which is and the reasons for the refusal. And if a proposal is not already made, I'm prepared to propose that we accept the recommendation, which is to refuse. There's plenty in here, plenty of reasons in here as to why we should refuse it, and I don't see any why we should divert from that.
Anyone else? Councillor Taylor?
Can I just ask for clarity? Because the proposal is for a self-build site, does that mean that there is no requirement to provide any affordable housing or commuted sums towards affordable housing? I note the comments around affordability in the report, but I just wanted to clarify that in my own mind, if I could, please.
No, it wouldn't make any difference, Councillor Taylor. The reason that no affordable housing has been asked for is because, well, one, it's recommended for refusal. It's contrary to policy. It's in the open countryside. So you normally seek affordable housing on sites which are more appropriate for development than this, i.e. on the edge of villages, towns and villages, where they would have to provide the required amount that's set out in policy S, whatever it is in the development plan. Sorry, I can't remember what that affordable housing policy is. But the fact that it's self-build wouldn't, in principle, make it exempt.
Yeah, Councillor Taylor again.
So in principle then there would be, if not, I understand what you're suggesting. I appreciate that it's recommended for refusal, but if there were any decision made on this site, or if it went to appeal, for example, there would be an affordable element, or perhaps in a commuted sum, as opposed to one of the houses being offered as affordable. Is that right?
If it went to appeal, we would make the point to the inspector that obviously it's contrary to policy. If the inspector was minded to approve it, we would point out that there's, you know, despite the fact that it's an unsustainable site, there's actually no affordable housing offered at all. It seemed somewhat alarming that you would insist on affordable housing on sites in other appropriate locations, but you're allowing then 8 dwellings in the open countryside without any need for affordable housing at all. But that's a hypothetical situation. Yeah.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Higginson moved to accept the recommendation. Yeah. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wintle has seconded. Could I have a show of hands to accept the recommendation, please? For refusal, that is.
Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for refusal, Chair.
Those for approval? 2.
2 for approval.
Abstentions, please?
2 abstentions.
2 abstentions.
So the application is refused, Chair.
Right, thank you.
Could I just say, Madam Chair,
I'm sorry, Councillor Dovey, but you'll have to put your hand up higher to make it more obvious that I can accept your request. Thank you. We now go on to page 18. Sorry, no, sorry, it's number 32.
Thank you, Chair. We're back at this site again. This application was deferred at the meeting held on the 2nd of September and also the 5th of August, as members indicate they wanted the applicants to consider the access arrangements further to overcome the concerns relating to the use of the access between 16 and 18 St James's Square. If we just run through the photos, there's the site there in front of us. That's the access in question between 16 and 18, which is safe routes to school as well. The applicant has now fully considered the position of committee members and has submitted an amended access plan and a plan showing the subdivision of the land to seek to address committee's concerns in that just one dwelling will be served off the narrower access, and this would be the dwelling proposed within number 12 St James's Square, which is the dwelling with the blue car parked in front of it. Is that right? Or is that the dentist? Sorry. Let me just get to the plan and then I'll work out where I am. That's right. sorry, it's not the one with the blue car in front of it. That's number 16. It's further up. It's number 12. So that's the property which would be accessed through here, as we'll see from the later drawings. So there's 2 properties going converted in here, 1 in here, and then 1 converted from the outbuilding at the back. So 1, 2 in here, and 3 from this access in here, and number 12 through the access in here. So that's showing, there's probably a better plan I can show you here, which subdivides the plots up. So that's the property in question here, the lower property, which would use existing access. There'd be an access in here, and they would be able to park in the 3 spaces here. There might be a need for an amendment to this boundary, I think, just to make sure circulation can work a bit better for them to come out in a forward gear. But that's the arrangement there. That access is served by this parking here. The middle access would be served by spaces here. And then the barn conversion, if I can call it at the back, would be served by spaces here. And the larger property here, which would then retain a curtilage here instead of crossing through to come into this area, which I think what members were perhaps looking for before, would have parking here, here and here. So they would then retain an amenity area which would be more attractive then for that property, and so would that property have a small garden at the back then, a reasonably sized garden as well. So committee members are requested now to hopefully determine the application by either approving the amended scheme or refusing the application in accordance with the reason provided on page 35. It should be noted that access rights, which have been raised as an objection by a third party in late correspondence, are, and prior to that in the main report, are a civil matter between the respective parties, and that the issue is in hand. And the issue in hand, is whether the additional traffic using the lane from one dwelling would be unacceptable in planning terms. Highways have not objected to the proposal, which is noted, and there would be some displaced parking from the 2 businesses presently using the area, namely Clark's Printing and the Dental Clinic. But a reasonable area would be maintained for the parking for those businesses, in spite of the fact that circulation is needed to reach the application site, as it is now required for the business's traffic to access and egress the site. And the width of around 2 cars would need to be kept clear to enable the cars associated with the dwelling in here to actually come in through that access and get through the area here. To actually come in and then park in the curtilage. And we feel that the addition of the traffic associated with 1 dwelling would be limited, and this wouldn't be unacceptable in traffic or parking terms. So we would still recommend approval as officers.
Right, I've got it on my list that the local member was going to speak on this today, but obviously he hasn't arrived. So I will take the gentleman at the back there, please, from Monmouth Town Council. Could you state your name, please, and you have 4 minutes.
I'm Chris Munslow, Councillor Chris Munslow, and the local member Bob. Unfortunately, he's got his son's getting married today, so he's
right.
somewhat engaged. So.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I say Chris Munslow. First time I've been here, so it's a little bit strange. But anyway, reference this application. We discussed it in depth at our planning meeting last Monday in the evening. And as you can appreciate, it was refused by the Town Council again, specifically and only because of the proposed access problems expected between number 16 and number 18 St James Street. Sorry, St James Square. There are no objections at all to the proposal to divide St James House into the 3 properties or to convert the barn to the rear of the property. That's no problem at all. However, the committee is adamant that all vehicular access to the site should be redirected through the Park William Jones Road. That's the one on the top of the screen there, which is right next to the library. The Town Council feels strongly that access to these 3 proposed parking spaces, and that's all it seems to be, would be considerably simpler and safer if redirected via that newly constructed road, which the road is actually, it's got turn-ins, it's already prepared for it. A number of complications stroke difficulties will, however, arise if access is granted to use this narrow alleyway between 16 and 18. And we call it an alleyway because, quite truthfully, it is 2.3 metres wide. I just got my car through it the other day just to test it and had about 3 or 4 inches either side. So you can see that a van or a pickup would have a great difficulty getting past this very narrow pinch point. Emergency vehicles, delivery lorries, refuse vehicles, well, totally impossible then to access at all. The parking facility for number 16 and 18, and also for clerks' offices, would also be severely restricted, as the driveway would have to be kept totally clear at all times. That would also probably cause 1 or 2 other parking problems in that area, so that is very difficult. In evidence, it must be noted that the existing walls of number 16 and 18 both have quite a few deep scratches and grooves in the rendering from vehicles which have previously tried to get past that very, very narrow alleyway. The front and side doors to number 18, this is another problem with it, open directly onto this narrow alleyway, so that's another bit of a problem. The lack of visibility for vehicles accessing and joining the main road, or joining the main road through a roundabout, which, because it's got 4 converging roads exactly at the alleyway point, you've got Dixton Road, you've got the one that goes down to, I forgot the name of it, opposite, and the roundabout, and going into the school area as well. They feel it's another safety issue. However, the above problems are only part of the problem, but mainly we are very, very concerned that the main access road to Monmouth Comprehensive School, which passes directly past this very difficult and narrow pinch point into Old Dixton Road, it must be taken into account that in the region of 1,500 young people walk or are taxied directly past this alleyway exit twice a day, as the school is only about 50 metres distance. And we're very concerned that by giving approval to use this narrow access to more vehicles, this could put pupils at risk in addition to causing additional traffic delays. And could I please request you on behalf of Monmouth Town Council and all the people, local residents that have also written, are concerned about it, and also as a safety measure for the children at the comprehensive school, that you refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Do I have to switch this off, do I?
Yeah.
No.
We now have the applicant's agent, please. Could you please state your name, and you have 4 minutes also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Andy McMullen from Knight Frank, and I represent the owners of the site, the Haberdashers. I don't think this application requires too much introduction, given the number of times it's been to committee in the previous application, which there is an appeal pending as well, went to committee on a couple of occasions as well. The application has kind of been summarised as a reduction from the previous submission from 5 to 4 units. What has changed essentially since the last time it was deferred at the start of September is that it now reduces the number of dwellings serving using the access between 16 and 18 St James's Square to just 1 residential unit. What we have done since the last committee is to look at, if possible, providing all the accesses, all entrances to the site from to the side of the library. There are 2 problems with that. We did explore with the council's conservation officer going through the barn, which is to be converted, but there were strong objections to that proposal in doing so. The other option would be to create an additional parking area where we've got the parking proposed for St James's House. The problem in doing that is you end up kind of hard surfacing a large proportion of their rear garden, and I think the general view was, which was a view from the conservation officer as well, that would have a detriment to the listed building immediately adjacent to it. So we have looked at every option possible to try and omit access between 16 and 18 St James's Square, but we believe this is the only realistic viable option without having the impacts that I've just mentioned there. There were just a couple of issues that I wanted to pick up on that have been raised by the previous speaker, and also by the introduction by the planning department. The key question is clearly this access issue, and the question was posed whether one additional dwelling between 16 and 18 St James's Square will create unacceptable impact. I think this question is slightly misleading in terms of an additional, because I want to remind you that we do, irrespective of this planning application, the haberdashers do have a right to utilise this access for uses within the existing use class. So to describe it as an additional dwelling, yes, it is obviously the creation of a dwelling, but the traffic impacts aren't as just simple as an additional dwelling, which the highway report acknowledges. Probably the final point I would like to make is we feel it's slightly, the issue has been raised about displacement of other vehicles that benefit, such as Clark's Printing and some of the other residential properties along there. The haberdashers have a right, an unobstructed right to use that access point. We feel it's slightly unreasonable to refuse an application on the basis that we're displacing those vehicles when we're only utilising the right that the haberdashers currently benefit from. We're very keen to avoid a further deferral of the application, and we will request that committee today do determine the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. As Bob Hayward, the local member, isn't here, I shall ask Councillor Alan Wintle to speak first, as he does live in Monmouth Town itself. Thank you, Councillor Wintle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must admit, I agree with everything that Councillor Chris Munslow said. The last gentleman omitted to say the fact that that property that they wish to bring a car out from now has been in a residential situation for the other buildings for quite a few years, and since that time the traffic has increased. Also, the size of the comprehensives has increased, and my major concern is that the number of vehicles coming out of that alleyway onto that pavement. The children are coming down that road. They're not just coming down there twice a day, or coming backwards and forwards twice a day. They're coming there sort of 4 times a day, because the majority go up for lunch up in the town. So they use that pavement all the time. And the access, the rights away and all that, that's nothing to do with us. That's, I'm afraid, it's a civil matter. And all we're interested in is the highways and the entrance, and the number of vehicles coming over there, and the children walking up and down that road. That is my major concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Anybody? Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just seek clarification of something that the agents said? This access, this single access, the haberdashers have rights over it anyway, so it's already an existing vehicular route. Is that the case?
Haberdashers are arguing, yeah, they have rights of access over that land to access the area at the back there where they're proposing now, albeit that that's in association with the lawful use of the site, which is for well, use in association with a boarding school, presumably. I think these were used for boarding purposes, and their masters lived there, didn't they, as well? So they would have had to have been used in conjunction with that. So in theory, yes, I suppose you could have a master parking there overnight in association with the lawful use of that property. It doesn't appear that the use has been used for quite a long time, but that's, I suppose, if they've got uses established there, they could have opened up that area and reused it, and we wouldn't have been, we'd have had no issue with it.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps the officer can correct me if I've got it wrong. But there's a business, isn't there? Well, when that business set up, was this brought up as a query about the access when that business was put there? Because there'll be vehicles going from that. And this is one property. I don't know how many times a day the car's going to go out from that property, probably morning and evening if they go to work, or perhaps one other time if somebody's living at home and goes into town. So it's not going to be a massive amount of traffic going up and down just for one vehicle, one property, sorry. And as I said, this must have been looked at when that business started.
Very old established use, Councillor Powell, so I can't really answer that. I don't know how long Clark's Printing's been there. It's been there quite a long time, I think, from the late correspondence. Did he say 30 years? Obviously traffic ownership, car ownership was a lot lower then. Yeah, so I presume they were anticipating parking there when that application was considered many, many moons ago. But I couldn't tell you the ins and outs, and haven't got the committee report in front of me as to whether that was an issue. But obviously they're in there. It is a lawful use, and presumably there was a planning permission granted originally in that respect. Whether it was anticipated that some of the employees would park elsewhere in the town, I do not know. I'm just surmising, I'm afraid. I can't answer your question in detail, I'm afraid.
Okay. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just not sure I'm clear in my own mind about this. I understand fully now that the access is being sought through the access where the printer is at the moment to one dwelling. That's additional.
For the one dwelling?
Just one dwelling. When we were talking as a council, we were talking about an access off St James's Square by the side of what I still call the Rolls Hall. Yeah? And you go in there, and on the right-hand side, there is that long single-story building that is going to be redeveloped. Yeah? And there was a gateway by the side of it, and we were suggesting that access for parking could be through that gateway into the back. Now, what is the situation? Did I hear you say that they don't want to do that, and they're making an alternative suggestion?
I think the agent answered that, Councillor Duffy. I mean,
I just want to be sure in my own
I think the problem with doing that is that you end up forming an access through the grassed area behind St James's House, and then alongside the building to come into the blue area lower down, and that takes away the grassed area, which has a harmful effect potentially on the listed buildings there, and it also removes any potential for curtilage and garden area for those properties. So I think it's an important aspect. Our conservation officer did look at it on site with the planning officer, and felt that would be would have its disadvantages, if you like, in sort of heritage terms. So I think that's why this option is really particularly on offer before us.
So the cars, so the cars that we were suggesting went through that gap now are not going to. That's not going to be used. So where so I have it absolutely clear in my mind, and I'm sorry if I'm slow on the update, but I want to be sure about this. Where are those cars going to be parking now?
Right, okay. The yellow in St James's House, cars 1, 2, 3. In fact, there's actually no. So it's 1, 2, 3 spaces there, which accords with the parking requirements. The red area there would serve this dwelling unit in the middle. So presumably they would have to walk through here into the back, and then the converted outbuilding would park 1, 2, 3 here, and then leaving the property on the end, which we've now talked about, coming through here and parking in this area.
Is everybody else clear now? Are we?
The town councillor would like to clarify something, so with my discretion I'll let him do so. If you yeah, you can stand there and speak loudly, and then we will hear what you're saying. Thank you. David,
yes. Could I come up and actually show it on there or on the plan? Okay.
That is going to help cause some clarity.
Close. Yes, the green area talking through here. In actual fact, there's a garage there, like an old asbestos garage there, which presumably that's going to be demolished, hasn't been used for years, obviously. And this is sort of an old sort of foundation brickwork. I don't know what that was, but it's about so high at the moment, which presumably is going to have to be knocked down as well. But, you know, access would be quite simple through there, rather than this very, very tight. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Webb.
Just to clarify, so there are currently already vehicular movements going up and down that lane, and the issue is, or the issue at stake is, whether it's reasonable for one dwelling to move up and down that lane. Thank you.
Have you been to the site yourself, Councillor Taylor?
Not on the planning site visit, but I have been there previously.
Thank you. Councillor Webb?
I'm going to take the bull by the horns here. Sorry, Monmouth Town Council. I've driven that lane many, many times to Clark's Printing, turned around at the top and come out. I've got a small car, okay? It may be a problem with a larger car than I'm used to, but I haven't any problems with that. And I think for the property that's going to be used, it may be a selling problem because the people there may not feel that it's adequate, the access, but I'm going to move the officer's recommendations in this case.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Clark wishes to say something.
Yeah, there's just a choice here. We either lose the curtilage to 4 properties to give access to the 5th, or we use the access as proposed. And I'm with Councillor Webb on this. I think we should go for it.
Right. So it's been proposed and seconded to approve the application. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
For approval is 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 for approval, Chairman.
Those against?
2 against.
I'm abstaining.
1 abstention.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. We now go to page 18, and this is Cowent.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. This application seeks retrospective permission for the change of use of land for bringing in waste materials, processing and grading the materials, then removing them off-site at Unit 21, Cowent Army Training Camp. It's one that members visited yesterday. This use has been carried on since 2008, involving the processing of inert waste. The waste material is in the form of soils and aggregates, which is recycled and taken off-site. The site comprises a shed and an area of hard standing, covering approximately 10,000 square metres. The process involves a screener and a crusher, which generate approximately 90 to 95 decibels of noise. A generator is used as there is no mains electricity, and hours of operation were confirmed on site at 8 till 5:30. The site employs 4 full-time staff. It's considered that the proposal complies with planning policy as it utilises an existing building. It cannot be seen in the wider landscape. It reduces the need for landfill and is an existing commercial site which provides a sustainable and integrated approach to waste management. The activity is already operating and traffic movements will remain unchanged. Members on the site visit will remember that we use the West Gate, which is well away from the existing properties there. This can also be, the access can be controlled by condition. With regard to biodiversity, there are records of great crested newts within 120 metres of the site. However, NRW are happy that conditions requiring a mitigation scheme to be implemented will ensure no detrimental impact. The site is at least 250 metres from the nearest residential properties, with other operational buildings in between. No complaints have been received, despite the site having been in operation for several years. Therefore, it's not considered to have any adverse impact on residential amenity. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Paula. Local member Paul Murphy, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was a lot of concern about this application when it first came in, hence the 17 representations about hazardous waste and everything else. And the Community Council decided that they would do a site inspection of their own and entirely satisfied themselves about the actual use and the fact that it wasn't processing hazardous waste. There had in the past been a site within that area that was stripping asbestos out of railway carriages, and I think people naturally assumed that it was a similar application that was going on there. It clearly isn't, and I'm happy to recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Jim Hickinson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have any problem with it either. I spoke to the gentleman yesterday when we were there. It's not the noise element of it is well within bounds. It is in effect a very small screening facility, and there's nothing outstandingly noisy about it, and I don't have any issue with it at all. The only thing I want to point out is the hours of operation. He was talking yesterday. They're looking to confine their operations to that of the site owners themselves, and I'd like clarification on that one, please. Thank you.
In late correspondence, there's actually a request from, if I'm right, get to the right spot. It's the one I prepared earlier. Yeah, sorry, on the front page of your late correspondence that I sent out yesterday, email from applicant, this requests that the condition referring to hours of operation be amended to accommodate operations on the site as follows. This shall only occur between 0800 and 17:30 Monday to Saturday, with no working on Sundays or bank throughout public holidays. These hours of operation tie in with the operating hours on the base and coincide with the hours that the manned Westgate is open. So that would be incorporated into any approval if members are minded to approve.
What did it say about Saturday morning, Phil? I think they were...
we just got 0800 to 17:30 Monday to Saturday. But I think in effect the business finishes about, what was it, 12:30, 1 o'clock? Yeah, yeah.
If I remember correctly, he was talking in terms of operating Monday, Friday with Saturday for maintenance. Am I right? It's just a query. But
yes, I think he did say that yesterday.
He did say they operated till about 12, but they could do some maintenance on a Saturday as well. So I think that's why we put 8 till 5:30, including the Saturday as well.
Okay, everybody?
I don't think, Chair, that there'd be any particular problem with noise. There's enough noise from explosions and machine guns and everything else that goes on. Not to mention the helicopters.
Right, thank you. Councillor Howarth at the back.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. May I just ask then, in the conditions there, the responsibility of site inspections, is that our environmental team would have to carry that out? Because we are minded to possibly accept this, but there are a lot of these sites around the country, and actually they start at this process and actually do change, and to have an inspection for a length of time and not noted what's been there, and if the company moves or is taken over, I am very wary of this kind of operation, of what goes on in time. It's okay, they may do crush and fill and whatever there, but things do change. What's the inspection timescale? Because I think personally we should have this site inspected on a regular basis, making sure that what goes in there is supposed to be that, not stockpile of something else. Because if something happens, we could be lumbered with, or somebody's lumbered with shifting all this. It's happened before, and it does happen. And I just think we should have a condition in there that there should be an inspection at least whatever per annum, 4 times a year, 6 times a year even. I'm just bringing the point, Chairman. It is important.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth.
Oh, sorry, I was still on there. I think the responsible authority would be NRW. They would need an environmental permit to operate this site via NRW, and if things change, they would need a fresh permit, as I understand, if they wanted to provide fresh material that they wanted to process. It's all inert material they bring in. So
could we just actually probably impose then that part of the condition is that we need to see as a council the inspection reports, making sure that
it's outside our responsibility. It's entirely within NRW's remit.
So it's NRW's responsibility to make sure the site operates within.
Yeah.
But we're giving them permission here now today, aren't we, to operate within a time frame? And my view is we should stipulate that actually we impose that it is inspected to a time scale. I'm only making the point that it's noted on television now that a lot of these operations take place, and it's noted that some do not work and somebody's left with what's left there. And I'm sure people of Coent and surrounding area would want it to be run as they've said they approve this, but I would like them to be more confident in saying in another 3-4 years' time what is on that site is what we've agreed to as a council or as a planning committee here, and the NRW, whoever they are, do listen to what we're asking for in making sure that site's inspected.
I think you've made your point, Councillor Howarth. Councillor Devi, then I'll ask Councillor Murphy to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The time of operation is the thing that goes through my mind, and I hear what Councillor Murphy says. But very much as Simon says, the present operator might be good and reasonable, but he might decide to sell up and somebody else is there. I think that we should be specific about the timings for the site for them to do their normal trade business on the site on the Saturday. It should be specified with a time up to 5:30. If they want to do maintenance or something like that on plant and machinery, that is reasonable for them to do. But I think the hours of operation on the site should be specific. I think, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. You said, it wasn't, it was 15:30, you said. That's 3:30 on a Saturday. 17:30 is 5:30. Yeah, well, we were saying that they would work up to 12:30 yesterday. Pardon? Yes, that's the point I'm making. The hours that they do their business, which is sifting, grading, whatever it is, with their machines going around on a Saturday, should be specific. That is what I'm saying. If they're going to do maintenance afterwards and it goes up to 5:30, that's fine. But anybody who inherited that site, for whatever the reason, might have different ideas. And we would want to be specific that those hours are for the up until 12:30 on a Saturday, are specific for the running and operation of their business.
Thank you, Councillor
Somebody else might wish to do something else, and we would be exposed if the hours of operation were 17:30. That is not right.
Thank you. Do you wish to comment on?
Essentially what we're saying, they can work and or maintain the business between the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 5:30 at night. After that, they can't operate or maintain or do anything afterwards.
The gentleman which we were with yesterday said quite clearly their hours of operating as a business were up until 12:30. He was clear about that. I'm happy about that. I am not happy about the fact that you are leaving it open for the site to be able to do maintenance and run the business up until 5:30 in the afternoon. That is not right.
That's a matter for members, isn't it? I mean,
well, that is it is a matter.
I mean, the fact that the business might want to stop earlier than that isn't an issue.
No, it
is.
It is.
I mean, another operator might want to work until 5:30.
Yeah, well, that isn't the point. Another operator might want to work till 5:30 on a Saturday afternoon, and might want to do something that is not similar to what is being done there at the moment. And if that becomes open till 5:30 in the afternoon, they can do more or less what they like on the site. And we have no control of it. The site should be operating in fixed hours for its trade. If you don't tag maintenance and whatnot into that, people don't do that in business. You have the hours of operation, maintenance is done outside of the hours of operation. Your plant works during the time.
Councillor Davey, if I can assist, and I think I'm right on this. If the operator, and we're told that the operator wants to open between 8 o'clock until 5:30, okay, Monday to Saturday. If that operator wanted to carry out some maintenance after 5:30, he would be in breach of his planning conditions. He couldn't do it. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I, personally, and this is just my personal opinion, obviously a matter for the committee, I think it's more straightforward for the operator if they have definitive hours, i.e., be it between 8 and 4:30 or 8 and 5:30, whatever, and don't differentiate between what they can do within those hours of operation. Just my thoughts there.
With all due respect, Rob, I think you are wrong over this. I think that what they are doing, what they are working at, whatever it is, should be clearly defined as hours of operation. That is their trading hours, right? You shouldn't jumble their trading hours with maintenance. You are. You are.
Not to take a vote on it then.
You are, because if
Yes.
you say the whole thing goes to 5:30, then they can carry on with their trade up to 5:30.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I worked in this type of industry,
I gather
albeit
that.
on a larger scale, for 35 years. So I know what I'm talking about with respect. And in relation to this particular site, his access to the site, or the company's access to the site, is between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5:30. So, and we don't have any problem with that, do we? I don't thought. And in relation to what they screen and process on the site, that's subject to the granting of a licence. Am I right on that? So what's the issue then? The NRW are going to go there, and they're going to, and I know what the NRW do, or what their predecessors do, because I've seen some of it. They do attend at regular intervals to make sure that everything you do is in accordance with what you're licensed for. And I don't know what all this rambling on is about, to be quite honest.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy?
Well, Jim's just about summed it up. Just for clarification then, if they try to be on site outside of the hours 8 till 5:30, they won't be allowed to be because the access to the site isn't available. Secondly, this, with the possible exception of part of the Wormtech occupation of a different part of the site, is now as a result of problems there, a highly regulated site with the NRW. There is, I would say, little or no chance of anybody doing anything there that doesn't meet the gaze of either the NRW or the Ministry of Defence, who caught a considerable cold during previous occupations, and they're very, very alert now to everything which is going on in that site. As Phil said, or Paula said actually, sorry, it was there are no properties within sight really, and within hearing. That site has been operating like this in exactly the same trade for a long time, and nobody even knew they were there. So I don't really think that we've got the problem.
So you wish to move it, Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Second, Councillor Harold. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
10 for approval, Madam Chairman.
Those against? 2 against. Thank you. We now move on to page 25. This again, is it Clowent?
We didn't go and look at this because we've been here at least twice before, so I thought we had so many sites to visit yesterday we wouldn't necessarily go back here again, but I'm sure it's one you drive past regularly and are aware of. It's the former Wentwood Inn. It occupies a large and prominent location on the south side of the A48 at 5 lanes. The building comprises a main 2-storey element, so just having a look at it. There it is in all its glory, with single storey flat roofed extensions to both sides and at the rear. The property has been vacant for over 2 years, and in the past has been used as a public house, a restaurant and a petrol filling station. It was more than 2 years actually, isn't it? Yeah, it's not 12.
A long time.
Yes. The application is presented to committee at the request of the local member, and because the applicant has declared on the application form that he is a direct relative of a member of the council. This outline application seeks the total demolition of the existing building and the erection of 4 large detached dwellings on the site. It's proposed to stop up one of the existing accesses into the site, and for each dwelling to be served from a private single access road. This indicative layout plan, which I'll show in a moment, shows each dwelling being served by an individual cesspool and substantial landscaping of the site. So you just run through the photos briefly. That's the access, or one of the accesses to the site. There's an in-out arrangement at the moment. Now that's again the building there. That's the other side of the building. That's the houses opposite, the cottages. And that's the sort of layout plan that's envisaged, with a single access into the sites with little private drives off the access. And then that shows a landscaping scheme for the site, and scale parameters for each dwelling on there as it's an outline. There we go, I'll leave it at that elevation. So as I say, it's an outline application seeking total demolition. Policy S1 of the adopted LDP identifies sites for new residential development, says that the main focus is within or adjoining the main towns and rural settlements. This site is outside any identified development boundary and therefore constitutes new build residential development in the countryside, open countryside. Outside the settlements identified in Policy S1 of the LDP, open countryside policies will apply, where planning permission will only be allowed for instance, for the conversion of rural buildings, subdivision of existing dwellings, and dwellings necessary for rural enterprise. And none of these justifications applies in this case. The application is clearly contrary to the objectives of Policy S1 of the LDP, as it constitutes new build residential development in the open countryside. And the proposed development of 4 residential units would be outside, as I said, any defined settlement, away from existing services, and therefore would be an unsustainable form of development. The fact that there is an existing building on the site is not really of any relevance, as it's proposed to be totally demolished. Policy LC1 of the LDP states that there's a presumption against new built development in the open countryside unless justified under national planning policy and a range of other LDP policies. And these would include, for the purposes of agriculture, forestry, one planet development, rural enterprise, rural agricultural diversification schemes, or recreation, leisure or tourism. And again, none of these justifications apply in this case. And therefore, the application is contrary to policy LC1 of the LDP. It is acknowledged that the Wentwood Inn has now been vacant for some time, and more than 2 years, and that it is rapidly falling into disrepair. The building is becoming an eyesore and the site is being used for fly tipping. However, unfortunately, this is not a justification for allowing a development that is clearly contrary to national and local planning policies. The landowner could tidy the site up, could demolish the existing building and make good the site, or could carry out the conversion for which he has planning permission. The erection of 4 substantial suburban-style residential units on this site would have an adverse effect on the rural character of this area by introducing a group of residential units that would be out of keeping with the modest, isolated dwellings prevailing in this rural landscape. The erection of 4 new residential properties in the open countryside would cause visual harm to local amenity, and the character of the rural countryside would therefore be contrary to the objectives of policy S17 and LC5 of the LDP. Just looking, and that was a previous scheme that was approved on the site as a conversion, so that's what they could potentially implement, and that's potentially what they want, as, albeit as an outline. So we would still recommend refusal.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Murphy, again, this is your side. Your ward, is it? Yes,
sorry?
that's your ward again.
It is. It
right,
is my ward. Yes, thank you, Chair. I have no choice but to represent the views of the local residents in here, and I do acknowledge that it is outside of policy. But unlike my comments with regard to the previous site this afternoon, which is suitable for an employment site, this one is not. There is housing, as Phil has pointed out. There's Wen House at the one side of it, and if you go back to the site layout before that one, no, that one, that's great. There's 5 Lanes House there, and if you follow the lane down there, there's quite a number of properties down that lane, and I suppose you could argue that it's infill, but I'm sure Phil will come back and say it's urban development. But it is so unpopular, the proposed design for the terrace of 5 houses. It will still look like the Wentwood Inn, or as everybody calls it locally, the Austral Cafe, because it still looks like the Austral Cafe when it was a truck stop. If you compare that to the photographs of the site as existing, apart from the flat roofs, there's hardly any difference. That central core of the property is still there. So the application reduces the number of dwellings that the site has planning for from 5 to 4, albeit that it spreads them out. So I can only reflect the wishes of everybody that I've spoken to in the whole of the area, and the community council, who want to see the back of that and would like to see the 4 houses as per this application.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Peter Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. There is an advantage to being old when you sit on this committee, because we have an experience in this county where we have done exactly what we are being asked to look at this afternoon, and we allowed it. It was in Councillor Smith's ward. I'm surprised she hasn't been flashing at me, but we had the nightclub at Llanbaddock called Savas. It was a mess. It was falling down, and we were persuaded by George Ashworth to allow 5 detached properties on that site, totally out of policy. And none of us could understand how we got there, but we did, and we allowed it. They've been built, they're highly successful, and it hasn't caused a problem. Now we have exactly the same situation here this afternoon, and I think Phil is right. We've been looking at this eyesore for so long. It's on one of our main arteries, and I think it's one of those occasions where we allow something to be, as the officers are saying, outside policy, but I think we should give it another look at.
Sorry, Councillor Howard, then Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got to go along the lines with the officer here on this one, because exactly the same as the previous application, we can't bend and move the LDP regulations that were set in place, and they are there. It was quite an intensive report on the last one. There's quite an intensive report on this one. It's exactly the same. It's open countryside. Yeah, we've got a few houses around it, same as we had a few houses around the previous one. But we should take out every application in its context of what we got as before us today, and we shouldn't use the other one as a reference. But human nature will cause that for us to do that. So if we drop our guard and allow one, it means we could end up with lots more coming before us saying, well, you've done this one, you've done that one, you use your policies, use your LDP to categorise everything you have with one, but you seem to have gone with another one. So I'm going to recommend with the officers that we refuse this one on the basis of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Webb?
Yes, I have to concur with what Councillor Howard has just said, but would be interested to know if the Community Council responded as a late correspondence at all, please.
To be fair to the Community Council, yeah, it's in late correspondence. They did comment in August, and for some reason, I don't know what happened, it wasn't picked up in the planning email box, so it wasn't then passed on to the case officer. But we have reported it as late correspondence because we chased it up. And I think it's on page... yeah, it's on the second page of your late correspondence, and they've said, approve, recommend a stone finish, they query the presence of the petrol tanks, and they say, we realise this is outside planning policy, but we feel the building currently there is an eyesore, and this is the best option that has come before us to improve the site. So that's what they said.
Phil. Anybody else wish to comment? It's been moved by Councillor Howard. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, did you wish to speak first? Thank you.
I was just going to say that because we did grant a planning permission on this property, obviously for five is a number of dwellings, but
more a conversion of the building.
Yes, in line with it being a converted building. Now, whilst I completely sympathise, it is a dreadful eyesore and has been for a long, long time. I mean, it's really a shame that the material, you know, because you've got what you've got opposite it is a terrace, is a number of houses, old stone terraced houses, which are very, very attractive, actually. And, you know, I can't necessarily see that what's being proposed today is just consistent with and it really, I suppose what I wanted to say, it's a real shame that the actual terraced proposal wasn't more like the what you have opposite, because that is very attractive and in keeping with you know what's surrounding it. But I can't support what's before us today. I think that's really a step too far, but I do have some sympathy with the site.
Thank you. Perhaps the applicant will come back with an amended plan or something. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I tend to go along with Francis, Councillor Taylor here. If they could make that original planning for the terrace of that's one. If that could have some sort of stonework in it to make it look more to match the terrace.
What is in front of us now today?
That's right.
Thank
then
you.
I think the reason that that's sort of not so good is because of the outside of it, and I think that we're in a difficult position because if we allow these four, we're going against policy, and we are supposed to stick with the policies.
Thank you.
Might I second Councillor Howard's proposal? Sorry.
So could I show of hands council officers that it is to refuse this application.
Nine for refusal, Chairman.
Those against?
And 3 for approval. So the application is refused.
Thank you. We now go to page 44, Pandy Abergavenny.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for the erection of a detached dwelling to replace a barn and mobile home at T Goetre, Pandy. It's one that we visited there, and you can see the barn with the mobile home set inside it. The application site comprises 33 acres of pasture land in an elevated position which was purchased 8 years ago. There are 2 agricultural buildings on the site, one of which contains the mobile home. It's claimed that this building and mobile home have been in position for 15 years. However, no certificates of lawful use or development have been applied for or granted. Therefore, they're not considered to be lawful. In 2011, there were 100 ewes, 9 beef store cattle, 3 sows and a boar on the holding. Now there are 85 ewes with lambs and 12 store cattle. The applicant is fully employed elsewhere, so runs this holding on a part-time basis and will be claiming state pension this financial year. The site is within open countryside where new dwellings are only permitted where there is a functional and financial justification. An agricultural appraisal undertaken by an independent expert on behalf of the council concludes that the proposal does not meet the functional and financial test for a new enterprise dwelling, and is therefore contrary to national and local planning policy. Officers therefore recommend refusal of this application for the reasons specified in the report.
Thank you, Paula. Most of us went there to the site visit yesterday. I believe Councillor Powell would be the only... No. Councillor David Jones. You have 6 minutes and 2 minutes later to sum up if you so wish.
Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say at the outset that if we were living in a society that worked to an agenda of common sense, then I'm convinced that we wouldn't be discussing this issue this afternoon. Let us look at the details here. Somebody has lived at the site in question for many years before the applicant bought the property and moved in. The applicant has lived there, he has paid utility companies, paid the television licence and has a postcode. However, since being advised that he was living there unlawfully, he has been of no fixed abode and forced to live with family, stay away overnight as his job demands, or stay in his camper van. All that Mr Meredith, the applicant, wants is to be allowed to build a modest residence for himself, to live and spend his retirement carrying out the same activities as he has done for several years. Of course, in formalising the situation and living there, he would pay council tax. And I'm told that that is a win-win situation. Now, what about the farming that he has done? First of all, the information presented to Monmouthshire County Council regarding the farming was collected in an agricultural appraisal by a consultant from Oxfordshire during a telephone conversation whilst Mr Meredith was at work as a lorry driver. Whilst I think that this was neither appropriate nor professional, I cannot understand how the findings can be relied upon, as a reliable opinion cannot be formed without accurate information that is gained by visiting the farm. This wasn't done. The truth of the matter is that Mr Meredith has farmed the holding and made a profit without the benefit of a single farm payment. This payment, the single farm payment, so often makes the difference between a profit and loss to a farming business. Now, I don't feel entirely comfortable to be exposing what is essentially private business affairs, but I am assured that Mr Meredith's only intention is to apply for planning permission so he can live at Tir Goetre and carry out his farming interest to help supplement his state pension of about £160 a week. Of course, living on the premises will have its advantages. During lambing and calving times, animal care is a 24 hours a day supervision. Time taken to travel from elsewhere can be critical, and literally a matter of life or death. Or put it another way, a profit or a loss. Another important issue is that of security. We hear almost daily of thefts from agricultural premises. I have here a letter from Mr Meredith's insurers, the Farmers Union of Wales, who categorically state that the insurance premium will be loaded if he's not residing at his farm. It could be argued the security measures could be used, but that would mean cameras and similar devices being installed. Or it could mean security guards patrolling, and these personnel would need to be on site throughout the day and night. They would also need, as health and safety laws demand, a building to be based in. Oh dear, doesn't it make a bit more sense to build a house there? If we look at the planning issues attached to this application, then Mr Meredith was given planning permission to build an agricultural building 6 years ago.
Could you wind up, please, Councillor Jones?
Yes.
You're out of time.
Should this mean that he intends to live there on the farm? The truth of the matter is that he did at that time live there. On either side of the property, there are similar-sized dwellings where farming takes place and planning permission for a dwelling is being granted by Monmouthshire County Council. In other words, a precedent has already been set in the area. So to return to my initial point of the case of common sense, Mr Meredith is a hard-working, proud man who wants to retire and sustain himself on the premises that he regards as his home. Unfortunately, there is no house. I ask that this committee grants permission for the house to be built. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Right, now I will take Councillor Powell from Abergavenny, then Councillor Douglas Edwards. No, you don't wish to speak. Oh,
Thank you, Chairman. The agricultural advice was on whether it was a viable proposition for 33 acres to make a living off. I'm sure that it would be possible to make a living off 33 acres if they had a shed with intensive pigs or poultry or something like that. So I can't see how they can rule out the 33 acres isn't a viable proposition to make a living off. And if that's the case, if you can make a living off it, then you should be allowed to live on there. But if it isn't the rules, that's...
No, he doesn't demonstrate that, though.
Yeah. To demonstrate the financial needs, you have to provide audited accounts to show that you have a viable agricultural business on the land. And the applicant has only submitted 2 years of unaudited accounts to submit his application, and he's shown a return that is insufficient to support a full-time worker. So he hasn't shown that he's been operating financially viably holding there.
So it doesn't go on the acreage, it goes on... That leaves me in a difficult position. So it is a difficult position because obviously he would want to live there to carry on what he is doing. But if that's how it's worked out, it takes that bit of acreage away then. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. No, I was out of the room when Phil made his presentation. I think it would be unfair for me to vote on this particular issue, one way or the other.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Doug, could you please take your microphone off? I know from personal experience it is quite an onerous task to get any agricultural dwelling of any sort in the countryside. And they do have independent consultants doing that. And personally, no, I couldn't see how you could ever make a living off this, and its man hours. It's quite a big onerous appraisal that has to be done. And obviously he was earning a living off-site anyway. And if you're not careful, it opens the gates for somebody buying a couple of acres, build a shed, either convert the shed or put a house on it. So, you know, it would open the floodgates for all that sort of thing. That's my interpretation of it. I don't know if the officers agree, but you also have to have, for the foreseeable future, that it is going to be a viable operation as well. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so I'd like somebody to move the application, please. Councillor Murphy, do you wish to take the recommendation of refusal? Could you have a seconder, please? Second. Right. Could I have a show of hands for refusal, please?
7 for refusal, Chairman.
Those in favour? Abstentions, please.
Okay, thank you.
We now go to Llangibby-esque on page 49.
Thank you, Chair. This is one the members visited yesterday and braved the elements and the cowpats. It relates to the rehabilitation and extension of a former cottage at Pennyglog, Tun Road, Llangibby. The cottage is an abandoned stone cottage, an outbuilding in the open countryside, which was last occupied in 1968. Since that time, it has fallen into disrepair. However, a structural survey submitted with the application has found the building to be generally sound, subject to some rebuilding and repointing works. It is proposed to incorporate the cottage and outbuilding into the renovated dwelling, together with a 1.5-storey extension to provide a home office and additional bedroom, which would equate to a volume increase of approximately 16%. The site is accessed via an existing field gateway onto Tun Road. The rear wall and the upper part of the side gable of the outbuilding will require rebuilding after a tree fell on the building last winter. However, this equates to no more than about 25% of the structure. Therefore, it is considered that there is sufficient original structure remaining for it to be rehabilitated into a dwelling under Policy H4. The proposed extension is considered to be modest in scale and in keeping with the character of the building. The site is relatively isolated and screened from close views by hedgerows and trees and would not affect the wider landscape. Members will see from late correspondence that highways have been consulted on the access arrangements and have no objections subject to their proposed conditions. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Right. A lot of members were there yesterday, trudging in the pouring rain and wind and umbrellas going inside out. It was quite an adventure across the fields. We don't usually get a wet day on site visits, but we certainly hit one yesterday, although it was nice in the afternoon. So, local member, would you like to speak first, Councillor Clark, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got an open view on this particular one, but I'd rather hear what the rest of you have got to say, and I'll base my decision on your thinkings.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Murphy?
I suppose I've got to say something. I was absolutely amazed that the structural report said what it said, but I'm no structural engineer. So I have to defer to the report. When I looked at it, I thought this property has just gone too far. Parts of it, the moment you touched it, it would fall down. But structural survey is such that it can be rescued. And I suppose on the basis of that, although I was minded yesterday to say you've got to be joking and recommend refusal, I'm not sure that I've actually got the grounds. So I'm sorry, Peter, I don't think that helps you very much.
Could I have some clarity first from the officer that if more of it is lost in reconstruction, that would sort of, negate the planning permission, that it would be null and void?
Potentially. Yeah, sorry, do you want to? Sorry.
It depends how much of it, if the structure collapses during construction. If a substantial amount of that structure falls down, then the permission may be lost.
Right, thank you. So we have clarity on that. Yes, Councillor Murphy?
Can we actually condition that, or would it be an automatic
It's an automatic, I believe.
I'll stress it in some way, because I'm convinced that thing's just going to fall down.
Right, thank you.
I was just going to say I didn't visit the site yesterday, but looking at the photos, I think it's a wonderful thing to do if you can save a building like that personally. That's my personal view. And if it can be saved, that's, in my mind, much better than leaving it just fall to the elements completely. And if it's saved sympathetically, I think that's, maybe I have a slightly romantic view, but I think that's a really positive thing.
Councillor Webb?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's more savable than some that we've approved in the fairly recent months. The only problem I have with it, I think it is savable, and I think there is a lot of obviously the report that you've had from the construction person. What do you call it? Absolutely, you've got it. We must agree with that. But the only problem I had was the driveway across the fields. It's a long, extensive driveway across the fields, which will be quite visible. And I would just hope that the surface of that would be very sympathetic.
Yes, I agree with that. I think it would be like a...
Yeah, there's a condition there to make sure that
it's like a
it's
track.
rustic
Track.
track.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's even grass-crete. It is stone.
Yeah.
The
twin track.
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
grass green.
Therefore, could I move the officer's recommendations then, please, and we'll test the other members?
Yes, I will. I will take Jim Higginson first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. And I mean, I read this engineer, the W.M. Clark engineer's document, and I mean, and they see 3 of the 4 walls, main building being very unstable and falling down without going any further than that. That's as I saw it yesterday. And I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was he should be knocked down and rebuilt, if anything, you know, from the ground floor. But no, this is to restore. My own view, and I'm not a professional, I have to say, is I don't think it's possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can we have clarity from the officer on your comment of knock it down and start again, please?
Well, that would be totally contrary to policy, Councillor.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I was going to respond to Councillor Romantic Taylor. It's a sadness you didn't come and get soaked like the rest of us yesterday, and I defy you to ever find this place if we don't get shown where it is as well. And that's a bit not romantic as...
Councillor Webb has moved approval. And you want to second it? Right, could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
Yeah, go on. With a very strong condition. Can we say that?
9 for approval, Chairman.
What about the rebuilding?
It has to be,
Be strong.
Yeah. You know, we can't go there and find it totally flattened and being rebuilt.
Or greatly enlarged. Those against, please? One. Any abstentions? Councillor Wintle, you're waving at me. I'm wondering what you wanted.
Well, for once, I agree with the NRW's say the application site hasn't got a problem with flooding.
Thank you. Thank you. We now go to Coppets Hill, Grossmont, Abergavenny, page 57.
It's 285 on the computer.
Yeah. Okay, can I just add for... The applicant has now gone for the previous one, but I'm really asking our officers in this instance. I had so much bad feel, not on this application, but a previous one where we gave permission, and that has subsequently fallen down, but we're still allowing it to go on. And we've got a problem in this. And I'll tell you when you're on your own. But can we... Oh, no, it was the site in Langibby where there was a lighting place that over on the high ground that shone over Newport during the war. And that has now totally collapsed, and yet we gave it permission on the same principle that engineers said it could be rebuilt. I'm asking that we have a really strong clause on this, that if this property falls down, it cannot be rebuilt. I'm just asking that we are strong on this one.
Well, it has to be closely monitored.
Yeah,
Very
by somebody who knows
monitored.
how to monitor.
There is...
Yeah.
There's a condition, Councillor, which says that no rebuilding works can take place without our permission, and it will be on our monitoring officers list to keep an eye on.
Right. Everybody ready now for page 57?
Okay. This application seeks permission for a first floor extension and dormer windows at Meadowview Cottage, Cupid's Hill, Grosmont. It's proposed to add a first floor extension over an existing flat roof single story extension, the roof of which is currently used as a balcony. 2 dormer windows are also proposed on the roadside roof plane. The application is presented to committee as a departure from the LDP, as the original dwelling was allowed under UDP policy H7, which related to the conversion of rural buildings and which only allows very minor extensions. The building was erected around 1991 as a double garage and games room, ancillary to the adjoining stone house. In 1994, permission was given for the ground floor to be used as a recording studio, and then subsequently turned into a dwelling with single-storey extension. Although the proposed extension could be said to take the total size of extensions to the original beyond very modest, in this case, it is considered that an exception can be made on the basis that the original building was always domestic in character, and the roof is already being used as a decked area. The proposed extension would result in a volume increase of approximately 19.8%, which is well below the limits under policy H6, which relates to extensions to dwellings in the open countryside. All of the extensions are below 50% of the original building. No habitable room windows are proposed at first floor on the side elevations, and the dormer windows are considered to be in keeping with the area. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah. Do you wish to speak on this application, Councillor Jones?
No, that's
right, thank you. Right. Any members that were on the site visit yesterday? Would you like, Councillor Murphy?
I don't have a problem with this, Chair. Recommend approval and move.
Second, it's been all for approval then, please have a show of hands.
That's 10, Councillor Taylor? It's unanimous.
That's right.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Right, thank you very much, Ron. Now we go to page 60. This is again in the Abergavenny area. If you have a tattoo, you can declare it.
Google Street View. The arrows. This application seeks permission for the change of use of 29 Cross Street, Abergavenny, from an A3 use to tattoo studio. The application relates to the ground floor, which was last operated as an ice cream parlour, but could be used as a hot food takeaway, bar, cafe or restaurant. The ground floor area is relatively small at 39 square metres. Policy RET2 of the LDP relates to development within central shopping areas and only permits the change of use from A1, A2 or A3 uses unless it can be demonstrated that the vitality, attractiveness and viability of the area can be safeguarded by the proposed use being able to attract footfall. The tattoo studio will retain the existing shop frontage with open glass. It is considered that the tattoo studio is a commercial enterprise which can be sited in a central area and offers a service to customers. It is considered that the use will attract footfall to the premises and will meet policy RET2. The opening hours will be 9 to 5:30 and therefore be unlikely to have any adverse impact on neighbouring properties, including the flats above. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application.
Right. Councillor Edwards, I believe this is in your ward.
Unfortunately, yes, ma'am.
He's blushing like this red light.
Yeah. No, I must admit that personally, you know, I abhor tattoos and whatever. And I've already got one tattoo shop in my ward. I don't see why I should have a second one, Kate. This was a shop selling ice cream. It was very nice, but it closed eventually, actually purely and simply because of costs. At the time, I was down in the area when I was talking to the ice woman, the lady who was selling the ice cream and was renting the shop, and she was paying about 14,500 per annum to rent 39 square feet. Really, you know, that works out at £371 per square metre. You know, I'm not surprised at those sort of rates that the shop has remained empty for some considerable time. And quite frankly, I cannot find any real good reason to refuse this change from 3 to sui generis. And being generous, I've asked somebody else actually to actually propose it, because I don't want to have, I don't wish to do it. Yeah, it's been empty some time, and I'm sure, you know, I must admit, as far as Abergavenny is concerned, it is important that the shops are all busy. Yes, good right morning, and that end of town has always been a little bit of a weak spot, and if it means that there is some footfall, well, fair enough, but I certainly won't be queuing up outside to get a tattoo. That's all I could say.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Jim Higginson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If that end of town is a bit of a weak spot, a tattoo might cover it all up. In which case, Madam Chairman, I don't go into any detail on this. I'm not into tattoos either, but I'm prepared to recommend we accept this application.
Right, it's been proposed and seconded. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
Okay, that's unanimous, Chairman.
Right, thank you.
Yes,
sorry.
Councillor Webb abstained.
Did you abstain?
Abstained, Councillor Webb.
You have to. No, did you vote? Yes, I did. Right, thank you.
Just for clarity, is just a very minor point. I think our planning code of conduct does say, unless you're in the meeting to listen to the whole of the debate, then you ought to abstain.
I thought you ruled that.
I did, but I was wrong.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah.
Okay, I will abstain then.
Right, thank you. It's a good job. It is a very narrow vote. Right, page 62 now, and we're back. And the SK area to Gweller, I say. I don't know if it's Gweller.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're back in Vowles Ward. This application seeks consent for the demolition of the existing bungalow on the site, which we show you there, and the construction of a new 2-storey 4-bedroom dwelling with associated garage building, detached garage building. The proposed dwelling would measure 16 metres wide by 10.5 metres in depth, and it would have a pitched roof that would measure 8.2 metres to the ridge. The dwelling would have the appearance of a Georgian farmhouse and would be constructed with painted render, a slate roof and UPVC windows and doors. The proposal also includes the construction of a garage outbuilding that would be T-shaped and would have a pitched roof that would measure 5.6 metres to the ridge. And the outbuilding would accommodate a garage, bike store, garden store and a small pool. And it would be constructed with materials to match the proposed dwelling. So just have a quick run through the photographs. That's the existing bungalow on the site. Another shot of the front elevation of the parking area over to the other side. That's a shot of a dwelling in the area, which I think has given some inspiration to the design. And then that's another view of it. Further down, that's lower down the slope on Wainfield Lane. And this is just shots of the variety of styles and the scale of different dwellings in the area. That was further up the slope. And then that was on the other side of the road, lower down. Big properties generally in the area. That's the site itself. There is a dwelling in the construction, which I'll show you later, in this site here, which is quite large as well. So that's the dwelling proposed on site. The dotted line, if you like, shows the site of the existing bungalow. So it is pushed a little bit further forward than the bungalow itself. And then the outbuilding itself would be in here with the current extension to the bungalow here. So that's an elevation of the existing bungalow and plans. Those are the floor plans of the dwelling. So it's got a symmetrical sort of rectangular sort of floor plan typical of the era it's trying to emulate. Those are the elevations. With depth of roof, which Councillor Clark noted, and sills and reveals around the windows and detailing around the windows, and a porch as well, projecting out, or canopy over the doorway to announce the entrance. And then that's the outbuilding there, showing the sort of T-shape of the pool set at the back, of a small pool. And then we have a street scene there showing the adjoining plot on the left-hand side, which is just slightly higher than the ridge of the proposed dwelling, and then the outbuilding to the right-hand side, and then a bungalow over to the other side. There's quite a reasonable distance between each of the properties. And that's the design of the property next door, which is a typical border oak frame type property with dormer windows in the roof. So the proposal is to replace the existing modern bungalow. It's considered to be acceptable in principle under policy H3 of the LDP, which allows for such redevelopment in this location. It's not open countryside. It's actually an area where we do allow infill. The replacement dwelling that is proposed is large, but it would be set back from the rural highway and sited behind the existing mature hedgerow that will be retained within this development. And dwellings within the village of Gwehelog vary in size and design, as we've seen from both the site visit and the photographs, and therefore the large proposed replacement dwelling is not considered to have a significantly harmful visual impact that would warrant refusing the application. The replacement dwelling would add to the existing mix of dwellings in the villages in accordance with policy H3 of the LDP. And it's similar in design to another dwelling, which I showed a photograph in the immediate area about 200 metres to the south, that being the Georgian-style farmhouse, Wainfield House. And as such, it is not considered that the dwelling would appear alien to the street scene. The submitted street scene plan outlines that the dwelling would be slightly lower than the neighbouring property that is currently under construction. And it would not be overbearing within the street scene and would integrate appropriately with the existing diverse mix of dwellings along the lane. The proposed outbuilding would be seen as a subordinate element in the curtilage, and there would be ample space around both the dwelling and the outbuilding so that there would not be an overdevelopment of the plot. And there's considered to be an acceptable intervening distance between the openings on the front elevation and the properties opposite. To ensure that the first floor window in the side elevation does not cause any overlooking, with that dwelling currently under construction to the north, the dwelling would be conditioned to be obscure glazed only. The proposal proposes to reuse the existing cesspool, which is a sealed unit, and to ensure this is suitable as a means of drainage, a condition is proposed seeking details of the foul drainage, and it's recommended for approval.
I believe Councillor Smith, do you wish to speak on this? Yes, please.
Right. Again, thank you, members, for coming to visit Wainfield Lane. You're getting to know it very well. You heard the comments yesterday from the local community council via their chairman. They consider the proposal is too big for the site. They're concerned with the foul and surface water disposal, and they have a desire to see the ridge heights stepped down as the lane descends. This ridge height is slightly lower than the adjacent house going up the hill. The lane is actually going down, so a lower ridge they would prefer to see, and I agree with them on this. It's a dominant building. Officers say, as we've just said, it's not an unacceptable impact on the character of Wainfield Lane. Well, that depends on where you sit, I suppose. There are a variety of designs in Wainfield Lane. They are large dwellings, and they do have garages. And the garage outbuilding that's proposed here, to my mind, is as big as houses that are built. And I quite honestly question the need or the desire to see these hugely dominant garages. We saw another one farther up the road that I hadn't realised the impact it would have. So there's a comparison that's made with Wainfield House. You saw a picture of that, a somewhat an older house, yes, a nice house, old house. It's sitting in acres. It sits there comfortably, appropriately sited for the size of the dwelling. It's in a big plot. We're talking probably 1.5 acres, I think, down at the bottom there. Or perhaps, I don't know, anyway. This proposal is squeezed into the site. It sits above the road. The road is at a lower level, if you remember. It just does not seem a comfortable proposal. It's also built forward of the existing building line. There's no infrastructure in the lane to deal with foul water. Surface water, there's the one drain that you saw going down the road. There is quite a concern from Natural Resources Wales. They comment on the risk of causing pollution via the cesspool and good monitoring required and such like. A scheme to ensure a record of proper operation and maintenance of that cesspool. They are really taking an interest in issues. We've had a big meeting up there with Natural Resource, well, Environment Agency as it then was. There is a concern it is an issue disposal. Using an old tank, not perhaps the best thing to be doing. The one thing that has not been commented on, the officer showed you a view of a house that was built farther up the lane. I don't know if you can bring it back again, Phil. That one. That is interesting because after huge negotiations, an appropriate ridge height was determined for a previous proposal that was put forward. And then the proposal was amended. Applicant brought forward a different design. Nobody in their wildest mind, I never thought of checking the ridge height. It's been accepted that it was wrong in that location. It sticks up prominent, and you see it well from the Usk Raglan Road. There has been no check at all in this report, seemingly, as to will there be any impact from the ridge heights of the dwellings we're now allowing going down Wainfield Lane. That house was built. Everybody's assumption was that after long negotiations, the appropriate ridge heights that had been agreed with planning officers would be accepted. We're going back about 3 or 4 years, 5 years perhaps. So that does need looking at, members. We could eventually be confronted by a whole line of ridge is going down, and that would not enhance the area. So I'm sorry, because I know people want their beautiful home, and I don't want to deny them, but I don't think this is the appropriate design. I would like to see this committee say, refer it back and have another little think about this proposal, because certainly within the neighbourhood there's considerable concern. Get it right and enjoy your home. And thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Webb?
Yes, I think, thank you, Councillor Smith. We all had concerns, I think, about certain elements of this design, and I would agree with Councillor Smith that we should go back possibly for renegotiation. I was particularly concerned about the building line, but probably that was just only one comment, I don't know. Thank you, Chairman.
Could the officers clarify, please, what is in the outbuilding? It doesn't just say garage, and I cannot read what is on.
Sorry, I should read it out. Right, it is a garage, bike store, a garden store, and a small pool.
It almost looks like another dwelling, besides what is quite a modest bungalow at the moment.
There's also the roof space.
Yes, I can see. That's why I wanted clarity, because I can't read.
You've got to also realise you're not going to see it. That looks quite stark, that picture there, which I showed you earlier. You're not going to view it like that. There's a big hedge in front of there, so you'll only get a glimpse view of part of the dwelling when you actually go past. You actually won't barely see the garage because the hedge is virtually in the way of any of that. It's got mature vegetation, front and sides and rear as well. So you really won't see it in that context at all. You'll just see upper parts of the proposed dwelling and a small part of the roof of the garage building. So it's perhaps a little bit misleading to do it like that and present it like that.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, the main axis of this house is north-south, and when we were there yesterday, I looked at the distance between the house being built above it, and by bringing it forward, I think this new house will cause shadowing on the adjacent property, and I would certainly like to see a drawing presented to me that said it wouldn't. And I'm with the rest of you. I just feel it's just too much house brought forward on that particular plot. And on a little point, you did say it's got a porch. It actually looks as if it's got a shelf. It's about a foot wide at most. If it's going to have a porch, can we have a porch?
It's
more of an overhang than anything.
Yeah, something that announces the entrance to the dwelling.
Yeah.
It is a large house, and when I went to the rear of the bungalow, yes, there's not a lot of amenity space to to the rear of that bungalow. So it is rather a lot on the plot, but whether take permission or come back.
I don't know.
Do you wish us to make the decision today or see if we can negotiate with the applicant?
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at that point in the rear. There does seem to be quite a bit of room because they've moved it forward. There is quite a lot of room at the back now, and that might be one reason why they've done that.
It's squared up.
There's still plenty of room around the plot, and that's the point we've tried to make, really. They're big plots. If members are minded to defer it, we can go back to the applicant and see whether they will amend it, but you'll have to be clear on how you would like it amended so that they've got something to react to, if you like.
It's just a general mass.
Before I take members of the committee, Councillor Smith wishes to comment of some sort, then I'll carry on with the committee.
Chairman, if I may, if you were to take that course and go back to discuss the issue, I would like you seriously to address that ridge height and the impact and whether it is going to be visible when the trees are bare from the Usk Raglan Road. I don't want it looking like suburbia up there. And certainly it is an extremely big building for that small site. And if you go and have a look at the Wainfield House at the bottom of the lane, you will see that it has the appropriate setting for that design of house. This isn't right.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Webb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about its size in conjunction with the plot as well. But in particular, the ridge height, it is actually in an elevated position on the site, and it would certainly help if perhaps it was set down. There's plenty of scope there for it. It might mess up their back garden a bit, but it would certainly be better in the street scene and more advantageous to the property being built next door.
Thank you. Councillor Webb?
On previous suggestions like this, haven't we agreed that the delegated panel should meet the applicants? Would that not be a good idea, Phil? Or have you got enough to go on anyway?
I think that would be a good idea with the case officer. I think you've talked about scale, but you haven't actually made clear really what's wrong with the scale of the for instance, the footprint of the dwelling. And you've said it was too far forward. You'll need to be clear on really, certainly the delegation panel will need to be clear on
what the committee expects.
And what committee expects, yeah.
Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Higginson.
I think the reason that they moved it forward is because they realised that with the house that they want and the size they want, if it's in line, then it's in line at the cost of the garden behind. That is why the house is built that far forward. For a house of the size that they want here, whilst that is a big plot, it's the scale of the house is a bit out of scale with the size of the plot. But that's the reason they brought it forward, because they won't have enough garden behind in their mind.
Thank you.
It should be in line.
Anybody? Councillor Higginson, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think I agree with Councillor Clark on this. There are a few issues there that there's no defined height of the building, as I understand it from this. That should be clearer, and its alignment with the property should be clear as well. And I go along with Councillor Mrs. Webb in that perhaps a delegating panel could organise a negotiation on changes to this plan.
Right, so it's been proposed by Councillor Webb, delegation panel negotiate on this application. Could I wish your council that's your wish of the committee? Okay, then, so that will be deferred for further negotiations. Thank you. We now go to page 69, Woodstock Way, Caldecott.
Okay. This will be the first of Monmouthshire County Council's 21st century comprehensive schools. The existing school is no longer suitable for delivering the current and future curriculum, or curricula, I don't know. And the new school will provide a variety of teaching and learning spaces which can accommodate a full range of learning styles, as well as to integrate the school and its landscape with the town. The new school will be designed to accommodate up to 1,500 students. The existing buildings vary in height from 1 to 4 stories, as you can see. Quickly whip through the photos. Variety of fine buildings on the site. There we go. And that's the lay-by where where the bus drop-off is for the children who are brought to the site by public transport. And that's the site in context. It's a very sustainable site right in the middle of the town. And that's the existing building. So I'll pause there a moment. So the existing buildings, as I say, vary in height from 1 to 4 stories, and all the buildings on the site that are currently used by the school will be demolished in phased manner to accommodate the new development. The wider campus also includes large playing field provision, and these would not be affected by this proposal. The new school is a 3-storey building, would be approximately 12.6 metres in height, including the parapet wall element. So start moving over to the new layout. The proposed building would be set in a new landscape site, providing a mix of social and informal recreational sport facilities, together with indoor dining facilities and outdoor classrooms. The existing leisure centre and community education centre will be retained, and the new school will be designed for extended use by the public after the end of the school day. So the proposed building will be faced primarily in a buff-coloured brick, and the areas around the main entrance, learning resource centre, dining and main hall will be glazed with aluminium framed curtain walling. In terms of the roof, the main flat roof to the proposed building will be a high performance flat roof system with finished with natural stone ballast. And all of the proposed window and door frames will be in grey aluminium. A new boundary meld wesh fence of 2.4 metres high is proposed to enclose the main school for security purposes. Currently there are 3 dedicated entrances into the school, 2 pedestrian and a vehicular entrance. And whilst the existing vehicular entrance for the school remains unaltered on Mill Lane, deliveries and services for the school will be accessed via a new entrance off Woodstock Way. And providing separate service access will reduce any potential conflict with pedestrians and other road users. And the building will be accessible from numerous locations, including a dedicated assisted learning needs access point close to the disabled parking and drop-off area. And the main pedestrian entrance to the school would be from the existing bus bay on Mill Lane. The proposed school will be of a contemporary design. This is running through all the elevations, sorry. Let's go back to those. Contemporary design. The concept of the proposal is to provide a variety of teaching and learning spaces by bringing all the students and staff together under one roof to improve connectivity and learning integration. It's considered that the scale of this 3-storey high school building is acceptable, as existing buildings vary in height from 1 to 4 stories in any case. In addition, prior to submitting the application, the school had undertaken extensive consultation with all stakeholders on the design aspects of the new school. The proposed school is clean-lined and has a well-mannered modern form, which will feature high-performance materials that will ensure the building's appearance is maintained to a high standard in the medium to longer term. The proposed appearance, scale and design are considered to be acceptable and would enhance the visual amenity of this central part of the town. So the proposal would comply with LDP policies S17 and DES1. The site is in a very sustainable location in the heart of Caldicot. Highways Department advises that the information and details submitted in support of the application, particularly the transport statement and drawings, demonstrate that the site can be readily redeveloped with little or no impact or change to the current operation of the school, even though its capacity is likely to increase to, as I've said, 1,500 pupils. There are 3 specific elements which Highways expect to discuss further with the school. That includes the bus lay-by details, the service access off Woodstock Way, and the surface water drainage management. And these elements should be conditioned to both promote and create a more accessible development. 2 individual neighbours have commented on this application and make the point that the grassed area surrounded by properties numbered 6024 Mill Lane would make a good car parking area for all the residents and for occasional visitors. This is noted, but it may be beneficial to provide an additional parking area. However, the site in question is not part of the application site for the proposed school, and the Council's Highways Department has not identified this as a requirement to enable the development to go ahead. And Highways will be notified of this request, and as a local highway authority can review that suggestion by the local residents. So we would, it provides, the scheme provides a high quality replacement of the existing school which is not fit for purpose, and officers would commend this proposal to members. We'd recommend approval.
Thank you very much, Phil. Councillor Jim Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's on my, it's in my ward. As we all know, there'll be many meetings here regarding the 21st century schools and the two tranches of development. There's a lot of consideration going into this. There was a visit to another school to find out, to pick out the best amenities that will be suitable for this school. I don't want to prolong any debate on it. It's going to be an excellent school when it's built, and I'm going to move the proposal.
Thank you very much, Steve. Did Councillor Webb wishes to speak, I think, and Councillor Taylor?
Just one thing. Was there any consideration with regard to the buff brick? Because I know Councillor Debbie Blakeman was very concerned about the colour of the colour of the brick. Were there any alternatives, or was this a foregone conclusion that it would be buff brick?
That's what's been presented, and officers haven't had a difficulty with that given the context of the site. It's a subjective issue, isn't it? I don't know, perhaps it's open to members to debate that and consider whether they think buff is appropriate or not.
Excuse me for cutting in again, Chairman, but what is I can't remember, what are the houses around? Have they, just a mixture, is it really?
Councillor Taylor?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, it's not about the principle of development or anything that Phil's outlined. It's about the, well, one of the issues that there is a potential for the school to grow, and it just concerned me really with regard to the number of proposed parking spaces that there are on site, and also this issue, which although is adjacent to the site, and I know will be discussed. And I know that Transport, it says they're going to discuss some of these issues further, but it just causes me a slight concern that we, that's not determined at this stage really. It says there's going to be 148 car parking spaces on site. I wondered if you could tell us how that was arrived at, because I was just trying to briefly, looking at the car parking standards for secondary schools, that seemed slightly light, but I defer to the officers' much greater knowledge. And the second thing is there are, and I'm pleased to see a number of cycle spaces, which is great, and I think very positive. But I just wondered again, so in the report it says 105, and then elsewhere I think I saw 150. On what basis has that arrived at? I just wondered, it just seems slightly arbitrary.
I don't know the ins and outs of that, but Highways have been involved in this process throughout. So it's a shame Mark Davis isn't here, and he could perhaps go into a bit more detail on that. I don't think Highways have got an issue with the level of parking proposed. They've looked at that in quite a lot of detail, and I think there's more parking proposed in this scheme than exists at the moment, and it's to take into account that there may be a shortfall at the moment. Having said that, there aren't the parking issues in Caldicot that there are in places like Monmouth, where there's a real parking issue there. So I think it has been looked at in a lot of detail by Highways, and this site has been arrived at as a sensible solution to accommodate staff and parents and other parking needs in the area. And also having a nod to sustainability in terms of providing cycle parking. The actual parking arrangements elsewhere on the wider site, for instance near the leisure centre, aren't being changed. They are actually being sustained. So there's actually going to be more parking provided as a result of this scheme, quite a bit more than there is at present. I don't know whether that answers your question, but I haven't got Highways here to go into the ins and outs of it, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Clark. and then Councillor Dovey.
Yeah, I was pleased to learn yesterday that this design is going to be very similar to Monmouth and subsequently to Abergavenny and to Chepstow. So we have the advantage of a planning committee for once, that we will be able to learn as we go. So if there's anything that comes up in this school that proves to be not to everybody's like, we can then look at it in the future applications. That's a great advantage. I'm glad we're not doing 4 different designs in the 4 different towns.
Yes, quickly, please.
Just say that's a good point that Paulie just discussed with me. Caldecott, I appreciate there's quite a few kids bussed in, children bussed in, but it's right in the middle of town. It's more accessible and walkable than some of the other schools, and it hasn't got the big hinterland that schools like Monmouth have got, where they've got more rural children being bussed in than here. So that must be borne in mind as well.
Yeah, thank you, Phil.
I agree with that. I just think that sometimes, again, you know, we don't necessarily think about longer term sustainability issues. I just think about schools that are built and there isn't adequate parking, you know, and these or have had very recently, you know, there just isn't adequate parking. They've had bike sheds and there's bike sheds for like 10 bikes and there's 350 kids in the school. You know, it just doesn't add up. I just would like us to be really considering these things. And I know this has been through consultation, but I would just want that borne in mind as this is progressing.
Thank you. Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Higgins. No, I'll have you last if you like. Councillor Webb again, and then Councillor Douglas. Councillor Dovey first, please.
I'll be very, very quick. It's following on a little with Francis. The school is going to be bigger in numbers, and I was going to ask myself about the parking, because there's going to be more numbers of people, a significantly larger number of pupils, and there's going to be more staff to service them. So I just wanted reassurance, perhaps, that that we'd really we got our head around. We had done the right research as far as parking was concerned, and Paula, I think, might well have answered a question that I was going to ask, because when we were there yesterday, I was looking at that area where the buses are going to come in, and whilst it looks quite a big area, you get a number of buses coming in there, and the school buses aren't school buses like they used to be in my day. They're really large units and need some room to manoeuvre, and I was going to ask whether we were sure that that area for buses coming in more or less at the same time, there is adequate parking for them to come in there. But I think Paula might have answered it by saying that the catchment area is smaller because people can, it's denser, so people can walk there.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. Councillor Webb?
Yes. Thank you. Can I just ask, Chairman, Councillor Higginson, if there was given a choice, if you were given a choice with regards to the bricks, because it's a huge feature on the actual building, please.
Councillor Higginson?
Yes,
could you answer Councillor Webb, please?
Yeah. I'll come back to that. Could I, did you say 140 parking spaces?
137, I think.
Sorry?
137, I think.
Yeah. Well, you've got a school with about 100 staff, and there'll be more pupils going to that school in the past than what are currently going there. So I think that, and bear in mind, there's the car parking Woodstock Way as well, which covers the best part of 100 parking spaces. So I think is well catered for. That provision that requirement is well provided for. In relation to what Councillor Dovey just said about the school buses, I mean, I go past there every day, you know, many times a day. But where that lorry and that car is there now in that bus bay, that bus bay in the afternoon is absolutely full with our school buses. So then, and it's adequate. it is adequate in terms, but they are, you know, they are double parked, but it's a matter of going out from the ones from the left and coming out the other way from the right. So yeah, the parking and the bus
It's well
bay,
catered
the
for.
bus parking bay is adequate. And what was that, Councillor Webb?
Councillor Webb wishes to know, I believe, whether you were consulted over the colour of the brick, the buff brick.
No, I wasn't, but I go along with what the planning committee think is appropriate.
Councillor Wintle? Councillor Murphy?
The idea of the buff was it's less visually obtrusive than the red.
Red's in mass. Red but can look a bit austere, can't it?
It's a large building, and you don't want to throw it in people's faces.
The doctor's next door is pretty much.
Right. Is somebody wishing to move the application? Right, Jim, you move for approval. Have you got a seconder? Councillor Powell, show of hands for approval, please.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Right, thank you. We go to the last application on page 78 of Shine Where Councillor, he's still with us, he's very patient, he's still Right, Phil?
Thank you. Right. Planning permission is sought for the creation of a photovoltaic solar park comprising approximately 33,000 solar panels over 5 fields, used for pasture, situated approximately 1.5 kilometres southeast of Shire Newton. The land is undulating pasture land, and to its immediate east is Saint Pierre Great Woods, which is within the AOMB. A 33 kV overhead line crosses the site, which we understand now has been confirmed by Western Power Distribution, and it is via this the proposed solar park would provide electricity to the grid. The proposal involves the erection of arrays of photovoltaic panels, maximum of 2.7 metres in height, in modules aligned east-west to face in a southerly direction. Sorry, that's not there. In addition, a series of 6 inverter stations and a centre station comprising a transformer cabinet, a switchgear cabinet, and a distributed network operator building, which would be a Western Power Distribution building, are proposed to convert the electricity generated prior to being fed to the national grid. The centre station will be located within the northeastern field of the proposed solar park, near to the overhead electricity lines across the site. Security fencing would comprise 2.1 metre high deer-type stock-proof fencing with wooden poles at 6 metre intervals. CCTV cameras are to be provided again at intervals within the security fencing and will be mounted on galvanised steel posts 2.73 metres in height. These would be directed into the site so that recordings are made only within the footprint of the scheme. There will be no external lighting. The existing hedgerows would be maintained at a minimum height of 3 metres, and appropriate trees within the hedgerows would be tagged to allow them to grow on. Where necessary, hedgerows would be reinforced with further planting of appropriate species to be agreed with the council. The DMS security fencing would be located between the area of construction and the hedgerow, and this would allow hedgerow maintenance and provide a habitat buffer. The proposed security fence will be set back from the hedges by between 0.5 and 1 metre, with all technical elements such as panels and inverter stations set back from the final width of the hedges by 3 to 4 metres. And there will be a buffer of 15 metres between any existing trees and any of the solar arrays. A construction traffic management plan has been provided, and this considers that the most suitable route for construction traffic, including HGVs, to access the site will be via the A466, then the A48, and then via Crick Road, which we travelled along yesterday. The proposed temporary construction access is therefore located along Crick Road via an existing farm track, which again we saw yesterday off the Crick Road. The existing 3.6 metre wide farm track, which consists of loose stone and aggregate type surfacing, will be extended beyond its existing length into the site to link it to the site. And this will be removed following construction. A permanent access for maintenance of the site is proposed from the north of the site, off the lane that members then travelled along later yesterday. All weather circulation routes within the perimeter of the site are proposed to be surfaced with unbound aggregate that will be allowed to grass over in time. The applicant has confirmed From its experience of developing other solar farms, the construction phase would take approximately 16 weeks to complete. Construction at the site would be carried out Monday to Saturday between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening. A maximum of up to 50 construction workers are forecast to be on site during peak times during the construction period. A temporary car parking area, including space for staff car parking, is proposed on the site within a contractor's compound off the temporary site access. So that would be accessed again off Crick Road. The construction of the solar farm would result in a total of up to 360 deliveries by HGV over this period, equating to an average of around 4 deliveries per day. That would be 8 two-way movements. And after commissioning, they're anticipated to be around 3 visits to the site a year for equipment maintenance. This would be typically made by a light van or 4x4 type vehicle. And while the contractor's compound will have been removed, space would remain within the site on the access tracks for such a vehicle to turn around to ensure that the reversing will not occur onto the public highway. It's not anticipated that there would be any additional plant or equipment required over and above that shown on the submitted drawings. This includes any overhead cables. And should any further plant or overhead cables be required to enable connection to the grid, then this would be the subject of a further planning application, as it would be a material change to the current application. And this method of connection, as is proposed for this application, was used at the existing solar farm at Llancaio near Usk. In terms of policy, it's considered that the proposal does not conflict with advice set out in national guidance, either Planning Policy Wales or TAN 8, which supports renewable energy schemes subject to assessment of such proposals against development plan policy and other material considerations, including landscape impact. It has recently emerged that there may have been sufficient renewable capacity, energy capacity, consented and either operational or waiting construction nationwide. Although the government has indicated it will be cutting back or ending subsidies for large-scale solar developments in the future, the formal legislation and guidance remains unchanged since the application was submitted, and it therefore is determined, or should be determined, on that basis. Sorry, there we go. With regards to LDP policies, Strategic Policy S12 helps to meet LDP objectives by requiring all new development to be consistent with those principles of sustainable development relating to efficient resource use. And all new development must demonstrate sustainable and efficient resource use, and this will include energy efficiency and increasing the supply of renewable energy. The sustainability issues identified in this policy are covered in greater detail by the more specific detailed Development Management Policy SD1 in the LDP, and this seeks to implement the strategic policies by providing the detailed policy framework for sustainable development. Renewable energy schemes will be permitted where there are no unacceptable adverse impacts upon the landscape, townscape and historic features, biodiversity, the amenities of nearby residents by way of noise, dust, odour or increases in traffic, the wider environmental, economic, social and community benefits directly related to the scheme outweigh any potentially adverse. What has to be taken into account is whether the wider environmental, economic, social and community benefits directly related to the scheme would outweigh any potentially adverse impacts, and also the factor of the distinct identity of Monmouthshire not being compromised by any proposal. So in terms of the quality of the land involved, the applicant's initial analysis indicated the land was classified as grade 3B, defined as moderate quality agricultural land, which is capable of producing moderate yields of a narrow range of crops, principally grass, or lower yields of a wider range of crops, or high yields of grass, which can be grazed or harvested over most of the year. However, in response to this, the Welsh Government's Land Use Planning Unit, which provides the Council with advice on such matters, has had concerns about the methodology used on the initial assessment by the applicants, and it advised that a more robust analysis was submitted by the applicant. This has now been submitted to the Land Use Planning Unit. However, in late correspondence, you note that the unit is seeking additional time in which to respond to the report itself, the second report, the report by Hyder. The conclusion of that report by the consultant report for the applicants advises that owing to the distribution of the different grades of agricultural land across the site can only be realistically managed as 3B land. In effect, the different categories of land across the site are 63% of the site is 3B, 14% is grade 3A, and 16% is grade 2 land across the site. But as I've said, the applicant is arguing that, or the consultant is arguing that because of the distribution of the different grades of agricultural land across the site, this can only be realistically managed as grade 3B land in its entirety. I think if members are minded to approve the scheme, officers would request at the end of today that if you are minded to resolve to approve the scheme, that would be subject to that matter actually being endorsed by the agricultural, the Welsh Government Land Use Planning Unit actually endorsing that report and agreeing with the findings of that conclusion. And then I think your officers would be satisfied that that aspect of the scheme has been satisfied. In late correspondence as well, the applicants have also put in some appeal decisions in Cornwall where appeals have been allowed on higher grades of agricultural land, primarily grade 3A land. Whilst those decisions are in England, the actual advice is broadly the same as in Wales, in that things like renewable energy schemes ought to be located on lower quality or less quality, less productive agricultural land, i.e. grades 1, 2 and 3A should be avoided where possible. So I think that's one thing to bear in mind when we weigh up this scheme at the end, in that this report has been presented, but we haven't got the full answers from the Agricultural Land Use Unit who advise us on these issues, and we would like confidence that they're going to endorse that report before any decision could be issued. One of the key attributes, as I said, that running across the site is a 33 kV line. Not only does this make the connection much more straightforward, it also eliminates any road closures or construction works outside the site area. And it's intended that the solar park would connect to an existing pole by means of an underground cable up to that pole. And therefore it's highly unlikely that any new grid infrastructure would be necessary to enable connecting the proposed solar park to the grid. And as I've said, should a need arise in the future to provide any additional apparatus or overhead cables, then this would be subject to a new separate planning application. As a result of discussions, let's go to the actual drawing of the site. The northwestern field has been removed from the application proposal, which is that area there. The reasons for that are landscape-related reasons and archaeological reasons. There's actually interesting archaeological resources under that site. Additional information to justify retaining the southern part of the same field has been provided, which is where you see the area there. This area. That has been provided, and in the form of further landscape assessments, photo montages and information on potential glint and glare. Additional planting has also been added on the northern boundary of that area at the top of the site, and it's considered that the removal of the western field from the development significantly reduces the visual impact of the development on the landscape. So I'll go back to the actual photo montages in a moment to actually look at that aspect. The Council's Landscape Officer agrees with the findings of the Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment with regard to the sensitivity of the landscape, as the landscape is rated as high. However, she disagrees with the findings that the scale of the impact is low, and it's considered that there will be a fundamental shift in the character of the site, and therefore the significance of the development is likely to have a moderate stroke substantial adverse impact in terms of the landscape effects. Nevertheless, it's also acknowledged that the revised scheme and the mitigation proposed will be of benefit in terms of the framework it will provide, the patchwork of fields which will be retained and enhanced, and the fact that long-term the development will be a reversible change. And indeed, with the enhanced mitigation now proposed for sensitive vistas and with the wider community benefit being offered, the development would overcome the concerns raised with regards to the fundamental change in landscape character and thus help integrate the scheme within the countryside. In considering the overall aggregate visual effects, it's considered that the impact would be slight or moderate adverse, and with regards to the cumulative effects, there are no significant impacts as concluded in the landscape assessment. Overall, therefore, as originally submitted, there were significant landscape concerns. However, with the removal of the larger part of the northwestern field, as I showed earlier, the additional landscaping mitigation and the offer of a green infrastructure bond, it's considered that the impact of the proposal will be reduced to a moderate adverse impact in terms of the landscape effects and slight adverse impact in visual effects. The removal of the additional field demonstrates that the visual impact will be considerably reduced, with the exception of viewpoint 7, which I'll come to in a moment, the view from part of Crick Road, for which the off-site green infrastructure bond will offer compensation as per the LDP green infrastructure policy. So if we just have a quick look at the actual viewpoints here. This is from that lane we looked at the latter part of yesterday's visit. So that will be in year 1. You'll be able to see the tops of the back of the arrays at the ridge there. The rest of the site falls away down the other side of the brow of the hill there. So in year 1, yes, you would see the back of the nearest part of the arrays to that. The idea is to reinforce that boundary, field boundary, with planting, which will in time grow up. Not only hedge in planting, but it's some trees allowed to actually grow up to be hedgerow trees, and that would look after year 10, something like that. So you wouldn't be able to see the array from that direction. And in fact, it'll be a shorter time period than that because the hedge will grow up to actually hide the arrays well before that period. Then that's the view we stopped really at yesterday and tried to look at yesterday, but unfortunately there's a load of maize in the field, so we couldn't actually see that part of the area I was trying to actually show. What that's to show is that the actual arrays would be visible in the distance there. That's the actual grey space. So the arrays would be visible from that section of Crick Road near Coalpits Farmhouse as you travel towards Shire Newton. Also, you'll notice in late correspondence there's been concerns raised by Andrew Blake of the AONB unit, who has come back. He's got concerns over the impacts on views out of the AONB, particularly St Pierre Wood. What I would say to that is, I mean, the tree screen is very dense there. The only part of the arrays which you're likely to see would be from very much the periphery of that wood. If I can just hold that up, pass that round, that shows the site in red. The actual St Pierre Great Woods, which is a sort of finger of the AONB which comes down and then passes up in this direction and then back up here. That's the, so what I'm trying to say is that the actual Great Woods can be readily enjoyed without this solar park being apparent or visible until you're right on the periphery of that Great Wood. So I don't think, in landscape terms, that is a significant impact on the AONB, and I think that needs to just be passed around to members. Also, there is landscape mitigation proposed along the periphery of the park at that point here. So there'll be additional planting around that fringe of the wood here to actually help screen in future years, growing up the hedgerows to 3 metres plus height to actually screen any views from the immediate periphery of the Great Wood and the AONB. Without mitigation, the site would be visible from the Grondra, which is a listed building, a listed house to the north of the site near that lane we drove along later, to the north of the site. Views would be distant. The scale of the development could have a negative impact on residential amenity of the occupiers. However, with additional planting along the northern boundary of the site, together with the removal of the northwestern field from the proposal, it's considered that the impact on that property would be significantly reduced and would not be harmful. It's also been demonstrated the impact of any glint and glare from the proposed panels would be either nil or negligible, including an impact on the Grondra and Owl's Barn, which are the closest dwellings to the application site. So the proposal is a significant scheme, and whilst the on-site planting would offer some mitigation, there will inevitably be some landscape and visual impact, as discussed before, and therefore the council has sought a green infrastructure bond from the developer, which can be provided in the form of a commuted sum via Section 106 legal agreement totalling £11,000 for countryside access and interpretation, specific footpath improvements and a village pollinator project. So we'd recommend approval to the proposal subject to a 106 to secure the green infrastructure bond, the 3 additional highways conditions in late correspondence, and subject to delegated powers being given to officers to issue any decision on the basis that the Welsh Government Land Use Planning Unit agree with the agricultural land classification assessment conclusions. And if they do not, then the matter would be brought and represented back to Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. It was a very long and detailed report, and a lot of us were there yesterday to see the site in question anyway. So I'll call on Councillor, very patient Graham Down to you've got 6 minutes, Graham, plus 2 to sum up.
Not sure patient is the adjective I would have chosen, but there we go. Chairman, if I may paraphrase Councillor Edwards, you've already given me 1 solar farm. I really don't see why I should have 2. Unlike Councillor Edwards, I can think of very many reasons why you should refuse this application. Let us start with page 82 of your report, which refers to Planning Policy Wales. It says, in determining applications for renewable and low carbon energy development and associated infrastructure, LPA should take into account 1, a contribution a proposal will pay in meeting identified national, etc. targets. You then turn to page 96, which says, paragraph 6.1, the second paragraph, it has recently emerged that there may be sufficient renewable capacity consented and either operational or awaiting construction nationwide. Now, as Phil rightly points out, you have to make your decision on the basis of the law as it is, not as it should be, but when circumstances run ahead of changes in statutory guidance, then you have to apply, I would argue, common sense. We have sufficient renewable energy capacity. We really do not need any more. I then refer to the 10 commitments which are set out, forgive me, on page 86. These are 10 commitments from the UK Solar Trade Association. The first point I would make is absolutely number 1. We will focus on non-ag land or land which is of lower agricultural quality. The revised land use assessment says that a large part of it is 3B, but that a large part also, 30% or so, is of classes 2 or 3A. So that, in fact, a large part of this use is of higher agricultural quality. I then refer you to commitments 4 and 8. We will engage with the community in advance of submitting a planning application. And 8, we will seek the support of the local community and listen to their views and suggestions. The consultation that has happened was a very badly advertised, very poorly advertised event in Earlswood Hall, Earlswood of all places, which is actually nowhere near the site, between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. Now, I was there from 8 p.m. until about almost 9 o'clock. According to the report that they have submitted, between 25 and 30 people attended that consultation. If that is the case, then there was very much a last-minute rush. Far be it from me to say I don't believe them, but I don't believe them. And indeed, one of the respondents to the consultation, the occupant of the Grondra, says the majority of Shire Newton residents are unaware of this application. There are no notices. And I think it's probably true to say that very few people knew of this consultation event. I have to say that both community councils, Mathen and Shire Newton, have received unsolicited agreements from the applicants, which neither community council has returned, offering community benefits, some cash over a period of years. Quite whether that contravenes the provisions of the Bribery Act 2010. I'm not sure. I have reported it to the police, so we'll see what happens. But the major issue for me, Madam Chairman, is the landscape issues. Members will know that I oppose the industrialisation of the landscape. Thank you for those members who attended the site yesterday. You saw it from two roads, the Crick Road and what's known as Trelawney Lane. You will have noticed that if you're driving past in a car, you probably won't see very much of them. At the last time a solar farm application came to you, we were referred to applications to sites in Swindon and in Devon, next to the M5 and M4 the M4 and M5 respectively. And it's true that if you're driving past at 70 miles an hour, you probably don't notice them. And it's probably true that although I hope no one would ever drive at 70 miles an hour on either of the roads that we've mentioned, if you're driving in a car, you probably won't notice them very much. However, those routes are not predominantly intended, I suggest, for cars. They are used extensively by walkers and by cyclists, people travelling a heck of a lot slower and who want to see the benefits of the landscape. You saw the site from the roads. Unfortunately, you didn't have time, nor were you equipped to have seen it from the Saint-Pierre Great Woods. I wish you had. Saint-Pierre Great Woods is a particularly beautiful location within the AONB. In springtime, I invite you all to come in springtime because those woods are absolutely carpeted with bluebells. They are a magnificent sight. Look what the AONB have to say about this application. It's in your late correspondence, but I'll read it to you. The installation of whole fields of solar panels, perimeter fencing and new hedgerows would fundamentally alter this area in terms of visual appearance and landscape character. It is clear that this development in the setting of the AONB would have a significant impact on the AONB itself and would be a detractor to visitors to these woods. Using the applicant's own methodology, the receptor sensitivity must be, quote, high due to its nationally important landscape status, and the magnitude of change must be at least medium. This would give a significance of moderate to substantial adverse. This is a significantly greater impact than the slight adverse assessment made by the applicant and repeated by your officers. Policy LC4 of the Local Development Plan relates to the Wye Valley AONB. It makes it clear that development must be subservient to the primary purpose of the AONB to conserve and enhance natural beauty. The subsections clarify that development must be compatible with the character of the AONB, materials must harmonise with the landscape, and the extent of landscaping must be considered. The final sentence of this policy relates to development outside the AONB, but in its setting that would detract from the AONB. The AONB unit therefore considered that this application conflicts with this policy. Madam Chairman, that is the starkest possible recommendation to you to refuse this application. To allow it would be a criminally negligent and destructive of Monmouthshire's countryside, and I certainly urge you to refuse it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Down. As I said, a lot of us were there yesterday to see some of the viewpoints, but not all, obviously. So there's nobody that's most local besides that point, so I'll take anybody, please, to have their comments. Such a thorny and emotive issue that keeping your powder dry, is it? Councillor Wintle, then Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Clark.
Well, there's a couple of reasons I'm not very happy with this one. The fact that the Assembly haven't given the all clear on the ground, I think is a good enough reason for deferment. The other thing is, whereabouts is the badger set? It just says in the it's in the within the copse on the site. You know, that's a big site. Whereabouts is it? They'll travel everywhere. And especially you put a fence in a way, they love those. They rip them up. Yes, they've got to have a license. If you've got badger gates, you'll have other things going into that site as well. But I'm still concerned that also from the NOB people, and Andrew is not one of those people who sort of gives out these, oh, I don't want it at any costs. When he says something like that, it's not a good site. It's not a good site.
Yeah, to be fair, our own landscape officer's looked at it, who works closely with the AONB, and has done quite a bit of work on this and reviewed the additional information and the montage that were put in, and she didn't have a difficulty. I mean, I'm not sure Andrew's actually walked to the site and actually looked at it in detail from the Great Woods. The point I'm trying to make is that they're dense woodlands. It's only going to have it's only going to have an impact right at the periphery of the Great Woods, and it's also undulating within the woodlands. So again, that would block views from the large part of the woodland over towards the site. Plus they're actually providing additional screening along the periphery of the proposed solar farm, which will grow up to reduce any views through into the fields. So there is mitigation proposed. So it has been looked at by our own landscape people who are satisfied that it wouldn't have an adverse impact.
You're trying to say that they're going to stick the leaves on the trees so they don't fall down?
What are you saying? Just because it's a winter,
deciduous trees, they shed the leaves at least once a year.
Yeah, but
so you can see through wood.
That's a very dense wood. You can't see from when it.
Good God, you can't see the tree for the wood for the trees, is it? You know, when the leaves fall, you see everything. Even the hedgerows, the leaves fall. Well, I've been in the countryside a little longer than you.
Yeah, I must admit I am concerned about this one because of the close proximity to the AONB. The previous one wasn't, and I think it was more remote than this one. It's true that that people get used to them, but it is next to the AONB, and that is of concern. What's also of concern, reading those two cases of the inspectors having a look, is that they seem to be quite clearly adopting a policy of overturning decisions to turn these applications down when they go to appeal, and there's also a history of them awarding costs against the authority when this happens. So that puts me in quite a dilemma, and I'm not quite sure which way to follow at the moment.
Councillor Webb?
Just to clarify, Madam Chairman, the AONB do employ a planning consultant. I think these are the words of the planning consultant, probably with the agreement of Andrew as well, but they do have a professional planning consultant. And just one other thing, I've asked them several times, I'm sure we should have a Monmouthshire strategy with regard to wind farms and solar panels, etc., which we don't have. And I think without that, we're in a difficult situation. But I would like to recommend refusal, but I don't know if I've got any supporters for that.
I believe, was there the Rees report, is it, that was suggested that we had a policy that I heard the other day? You don't worry about it now, but I think we were advised, but I don't think we've taken it up. And my concern is that the other solar panel at Buckwell Farm, it was on grade 4 land, which is a vastly different type of soil and land than this. Councillor Taylor.
I was going to say that I had significant concerns about its proximity to the... oh, sorry. I was just going to repeat the concerns about its proximity to the AONB, but I'd like to second Councillor Webb's suggestion that due to the impact on the landscape, you know, we just had a presentation, supplementary planning guidance around green infrastructure. And obviously, you know, in my mind, this locality is a very important part of Monmouthshire's green infrastructure. And I personally can't see how this application is consistent with what we heard about our duty to also, you know, protect and ensure the longevity of our green infrastructure either. So I would say I'd like to support refusal in second.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't buy the "you get used to it" response to windmills or all these panels. We might get used to them because, after a while, because they're there and we feel we can do nothing about it. But other people that want to come here newly and see the place dotted around with these panels, I think might have a different opinion. You know, the beauty of this county is a scarce resource. We won't get more of it if we despoil some elsewhere. So I think we have to be very careful about what we allow. I agree with Phil that this one gives concern because it is so close to the AONB. I've also said in this planning committee for some time that, as Anne has said, Councillor Webb has said, that we don't have a policy here with regard to green energy. And I think that's sort of remiss of us. We ought to be looking at the areas where we should be considering putting wind turbines. We ought to be looking at the areas where perhaps solar panels will be more acceptable. And the other fact is, as Councillor Down has said, there is the grid can only accept a certain amount of green energy. It is, don't ask me why, my physics is long gone, but there is only a certain amount that it will accept. And it has been widely commented on in the paper that we are getting very, very close to that at the moment. So there is an issue here. I mean, I would sooner see green energy coming off our coasts into here rather than us trying to despoil the land with it. So I have to say, I think in this instance, just one more. When we are trying to make these decisions and we are looking at photo montages, I think it is not a very good way of doing it. I just think the photograph techniques here are not really very good. And if it is really important and you have somebody who wishes to make the case and make it well, then the photograph should be better. And maybe they come along with a mobile cherry picker, and the photographs can be jacked up, and the photographs can look down on the areas that we are considering. And then you get some idea of their situation and how that relates to the countryside around them. I think the way we do it here is not very clever. Having said all of that, I don't think I'm going to vote for this one.
Sorry, I just make the point that the photo montages are meant to show the key vantage points where you can actually see the thing. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is you can't actually see it from very many places at all.
No, but I want to...
if you blow that up on the plan presentations I actually sent round the other day, you're able to actually look at the individual arrays in there if you blow it up. Okay? So that's quite a good representation of what it's going to look like in the future from that distance. You're not going to get the definition of individual arrays from that distance. It's just going to look like a bit of a grey blur. But that's the one key point where you will see it from Crick Road, albeit we couldn't see it yesterday because of the plans in there.
I still stick with what I said. We need to be able to see these locations better than we do, and how they relate in a more wider aspect, which you could get with the photographs being taken differently.
Thank you, Councillor
Yeah.
Dovey. Councillor Brian Strong?
Yeah, could I congratulate Councillor Down, I think, on the way he spoke to us today. He did bring forward quite a lot of points that are really relevant, and we should consider the A1B situation, the soil or the grazing land that there is. It is good quality, and this particular site I don't think equates with the one that we've already agreed further down the valley, so I shall be voting against it.
Are we supposed to come to every application, and hopefully we all do, with an open mind and treat every application that's in front of us? I don't know if the officers can tell us that there are many more in Monmouthshire in the pipeline of solar panels, because one of our main assets and attractions in Monmouthshire is our wonderful countryside. Although I might be a little biased, but I think it is our great, great asset. And they're not making any more land. Councillor Dan, do you wish to stand up?
Yes, Chairman, if I may.
Oh, sorry. You hold on. You can carry on the walk if you like. Councillor Doug Edwards wishes to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. You know, I've been batting on for some time about solar panels on roofs of houses and things like that, and I do urge the officers to seriously consider that they should be producing some sort of plan for the county. There are three issues here. The environment, which I think Graham has already spoken very eloquently about, and he has been supported by members. And obviously it is important, and you yourself, Madam Chair, have just spoken of the same situation. And I know you have a certain amount of apathy to solar panels in fields. I think you've been fairly consistent in this. What are we to do as councillors? The environment is important to us. Carbon-free developments are so important, and this is why we are looking down the avenues of solar panels, wind farms, etc. And that's why I urge the officers to really look at this. But there is another side, and I think many of you, if you've been listening to the TV, the Good Morning programme today, they were talking about the price of milk. Now, this isn't I don't know what the this farmist just says that it's sheep and cattle, so I presume
It used to be a dairy farm.
It used to be dairy. And, you know, why is it no longer a dairy farm? Pure and simply because at the present moment, dairy farmers are losing something like 3 pence a pint or a litre, is it a litre, 5 pence a litre? You know, and there's no chance to make a profit. They are being screwed down completely by the supermarket chains to get cheaper and cheaper price, and somebody else is paying for it, and it's a great shame. So, and I can quite well understand why farmers actually are turning around to doing this sort of operation. If they are to survive, then this is part and parcel of their survival, is to have an income coming in from another source. You know, they're diversifying. It really is. We've got a real dilemma in front of us on every one of these particular planning applications. It is a dilemma, and you know, perhaps we should defer it for further consideration. I really don't know, but that's my contribution.
Thank you. I'm not saying that all farmers have taken the hit of 5 pence a litre, but we certainly have within this last 2 months. Yeah. Some at 0.4, depends what dairy that they're licensed to sell to. But it is but it is considerable cost. Councillor Down?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just pick up, if I may, on a couple of the points which were made. First of all, the issue of footpaths within St Pierre Great Wood, and therefore within the AONB. If you look at the map, it's not abundantly clear, but the footpath, or a footpath, actually runs immediately alongside. So you are on the edge of the wood, on the periphery of the wood, and if you look perhaps to one side, you'd see a beautiful mat of bluebells. On the other side, you're going to look at these solar panels and a 2-metre high fence. And even if some extra trees were put up, frankly, they take 10 years plus to grow into anything that would give any sort of effective screening. So that just is a nonsense. I think Councillor Murphy made reference to the appeals, which we've been provided with. In fact, there was no reference to costs on the Lanyon Farm appeal. There was a reference to costs on the Berthy Farm appeal, although that's a separate decision, and obviously we're not told what the outcome of that was. In any event, the decisions of the Planning Authority in both those cases were a year or more ago, even though they're fairly recent appeal decisions, and life has moved on since then. I think Councillor Webb's idea of a policy on locating these sites is a first-class idea. Councillor Harris, I think it was, at the previous application made reference to a site in Swindon. Well, the key to that is it's A, on the edge of a very large town, B, alongside a motorway, and C, very close to a travellers' camp. There is a second one that I know of in Wiltshire. That's between a disused quarry and a sewage treatment plant. You know, absolutely the right places where they're hardly the open, unspoiled countryside. And I certainly would be very happy to contribute to any discussion about a policy on that. There is one further point I would raise. This is a 25-year scheme. People know what I do for a living, and I'm very cynical about promises that are made by companies to be delivered 25 years hence. And if you were minded to approve this application, I hope to goodness you're not, but if you were, I would ask you to consider whether there should be a bond provided to ensure that the site is returned to its proper state in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Down. Anybody else wish to comment now before I take the vote? Councillor Powell, quickly, please.
I don't want to comment. I just want to ask a question of the officers. Do you know of many of these that have gone to appeal and the Welsh Government have allowed them? Is there a Welsh Government got a policy? That's what I'm trying to say.
We're aware that, not really. I mean, it'd be an interesting test case, the one that's at Llanfapley. It's ended today. Kate was just at the the closing remarks today. So.
Decision in 4 to 5 weeks.
Oh, that's fairly quick.
Yeah.
So we don't know the result yet then.
And that's grade 2 land, so that will be interesting.
Yes.
But I think when the application went in, I'm not positive, but they thought it was grade 3 or something then, didn't they?
Grade 3B, yes.
Yeah, and it turned out it wasn't. So, right. Somebody wish to move this application? Councillor Webb, how are you moving? Refusal. Do you have a second refusal? Councillor Taylor at the back, refusal. Could I have a show of hands for refusal, please?
Now for refusal, Chairman.
Those in favour of the application for approval? 2 abstentions then, is it? Right, okay, Rob?
Be clear on the reasons when we bring it back.
Right, you proposed it, Councillor Webb. Do you wish to say? Impact.
I mentioned at this point that we were criticised in the appeal this morning for our reason for refusal, and they did, well, the appellant specifically mentioned that we hadn't, in our reason for refusal, we hadn't included the balance of the positive aspects of it. We just said it on the general design, so it's just to be on that really.
The impact on the AONB and the visual impact on the whole of the area, of the agriculture area, the whole scene.
The point is you can't see it.
But we haven't got real clarification of the grade of the land either yet.
That's right as well. You'd have to defer it really if you want to put that information.
Can we defer it now?
Chairman, if I can assist here, you've made a decision. You've all voted on it. You are minded to refuse this application. It will come before you now again next month, I take it. By that time, we will probably, I guess, have the results of the soil survey, and of course members will be appraised of what the results are on that occasion. Members will have the reasons of refusal, and members will then vote on whether or not those reasons are suitable and appropriate.
Right, thank you all very much indeed, and I think we all wish Councillor Evans well. He's been back in hospital again, and he seems to be majoring on his hip, so we do all wish him well. Thank you.